Chapter 26-25. Empress Star Rain's letter of authorization was with the accompanying Road Master. Suyu had originally planned to arrange for him to retrieve the ruler's treasure without revealing himself, in case the Time Master found out anything. But now that he thought about it, he might really have to go. After a moment, he made up his mind. Luo Xue was willing to sacrifice his own life for his wife and child. What else did he have to hesitate about? Okay. Suyu nodded, then secretly crushed a piece of jade to inform the Path Master, telling him to wait for him at the appointed place. But at that moment, at the top of the upper palace, a vortex of air currents appeared silently. From the vortex, an unfurled scroll floated down rapidly, full of indescribable pressure. The entire upper palace trembled because of it. At the table where they were, the wine and dishes on the table were constantly swaying. The wine in the cups were shaking uncontrollably, constantly splashing out. The chairs under everyone's feet were also moving uncontrollably. Everyone, including themselves, felt a sense of oppression as if their souls and bodies were about to be separated. Yao Guang's face changed dramatically, and he led the many Time Masters in the upper palace to kneel down. We welcome the decree of the Time Master. That was nothing more than a decree issued by the Time Sovereign. The Time Master did not even reveal a trace of her will. But even so, it still brought unimaginable pressure. Suyu naturally would not kneel down to the Time Master, but as the scroll approached, he could feel the endless pressure. He forcibly stabilized his body, not allowing himself to kneel down. But his soul was constantly trembling, faintly trying to break through the shackles of his body and escape. Finally, it was close. The scroll stopped 10 feet in the air, and a voice came from the scroll. It was not clear whether the voice belonged to a man or a woman, but it was unusually deep. Everyone in the sky tracked down the 2 people below, no mistakes. As the voice fell, the scroll burned on the spot, turning into an image. In the image, the figures of Qin Xiener and Su Kair were visible. We accept the order. The descendants of the Time Masters said yes. Only then did the wisp of pressure disperse. They slowly stood up. All of them were drenched in sweat. Traces of lingering fear could be seen on their faces. How high is the cultivation of the Time Master now? Lulua's face was slightly pale. Just now, she was almost suffocated by that scroll. The alcade was filled with indescribable awe. Don't make wild guesses. We won't be able to understand the cultivation base of a sovereign. That is, unless we become a sovereign one day. Suyu was still sitting in his original position. But his back was already wet, and the chair under his feet had been shattered by the pressure just now. He had to use a strand of profound Wei energy to forcefully maintain the chair. It was too terrifying. That was the ruler of time. An imperial edict already possessed such divine might. One could imagine if the person himself appeared. No, there was no need for him to show himself. Just a thought incarnation would be enough to kill Suyu without a proper burial ground. This trip to the time wilderness of the time ruler was really too dangerous. The slightest carelessness would spell eternal damnation. Who are these 2 women? Why did the sovereign personally issue an order to capture them? Yao Guang and the others recovered from their shock, and began to copy down the images that were about to disappear. Lulua glanced over and was also very puzzled. And 2 humans? How strange. What do they have that is worthy of the Time Ruler's attention? The Time Ruler, who hadn't shown his face for countless years, had actually come all the way here just for these 2 women. At this time, several figures walked in one after another. Reporting to my lords, I have news to report. Several people each presented a message jade. There were 8 in total. After opening it, the news inside, without exception, was that all the forces, big and small, had received the imperial edict of the Time Ruler. Even in the sacred city, those who were not worth his attention had received the edict of the Time Ruler. It could be said that overnight, the entire sacred city, all the forces, big and small, had received the order of the Time Ruler. Moreover, the news was still spreading at an alarming speed. Before midnight, the entire world would remember the two women who were personally wanted by the Time Ruler. So strict. Several descendants of the Time Ruler gasped. What kind of existence were those two women? Yao Guang said solemnly, "Immediately mobilize the forces of the Upper Palace and begin the search." The Upper Palace also controlled a lot of forces, and immediately began a strict search around the Upper Palace. Do the Upper Palace need to be searched? Luluo asked hesitantly. Yao Guang pondered and said, "For safety's sake, except for the guest room of the senior, search all the other guest rooms." This time, the Time Ruler was serious, and they did not want to be careless. If it was really a coincidence that the two wanted people were hiding in their place, the situation would be too serious. Therefore, the Upper Palace also began a strict search. Except for the superior guest room where Su Yu was, all the other guest rooms were searched. Of course, the result was nothing. "Senior, we need to go out and participate in the search. Please excuse us for a while," Yao Guang said, cupping his hands. Su Yu shook his head and said, "It's fine. You can go." When they all left, Su Yu returned to the guest room, expressionless. Looking at Qin Xianer and Su Kai'er, who were hiding, he could not help but secretly feel lucky. Coming to the Upper Palace under false pretenses was the right move. Otherwise, they would be running in all directions. With the current situation in the outside world, hiding anywhere would not be as safe as the Upper Palace. "Brother Yu, are they searching for us?" Qin Xianer asked worriedly. Just now, there were messy sounds coming from the left and right rooms. "Yes, but don't worry," Su Yu comforted her. As he spoke, he looked at Su Kai'er, only to find that Su Kai'er and Huang Fu were discussing the martial path with great interest. The two of them were about the same age, so they got along very well. After thinking for a while, Su Yu said, "Kai'er, I have a place suitable for training. Do you want to go in and have a spar?" Su Kai'er's eyes lit up. Sure. Her martial path was too weak, so she had always wanted to improve by sparring with her peers. Unfortunately, she had too few friends. Huang Fu Yi's abilities were about the same as hers, so she was the perfect match. Su Yu took out a space storage device. The little Kylin and the others were in it. The space rippled, and the two of them were sucked into it. They trained quietly. Only Su Yu and Qin Xianer were left in the room. The two of them looked at each other, speechless. Then, they hugged each other and kissed. In the end, their yearning for each other for more than 10 years turned into a night of passion. The next day, Xianer's face was flushed, and she lay in Su Yu's arms, exhausted. The previous night had been too crazy. She was exhausted, and she did not have any strength left. She allowed Su Yu's hands to play with her sensitive parts. "Brother Yu, I'm so happy," Qin Xianer said, her eyes closed. Su Yu smiled, his eyes filled with satisfaction. Chapter 26:26. In his absence, Qin Xianer had raised Su Kai'er with great determination. How much hardship had she suffered? How much had she suffered? He owed Xianer too much. Looking at Xianer, who was gradually falling asleep, Su Yu slowly pulled the blanket over her and got up. Xianer should rest now. But Su Yu still had things to do. He put on his bamboo hat and left the Upper Palace to meet the Path Master. Along the way, Su Yu frowned slightly. The search was more thorough than he had imagined. The entire sacred city had come to a standstill because of the search. Shops, inns, caves, restaurants, residence debts, abandoned houses, wherever it was possible, people from different forces would go back and forth to search again and again. Some places where there were tunnels were even destroyed by the strong men, digging 3 feet into the ground to find them. "This is madness," Su Yu said coldly. The entire sacred city was filled with a kind of morbid madness, which showed how much they feared the Time Master. An edict without any reward made them carry it out like crazy. It showed the majesty of the Time Master. He came to the inn where the Path Master was. However, it was already empty inside, and there was a mess of chests and cabinets being overturned everywhere. Only the shopkeeper and the waiters were tidying things up bitterly. "Where are the guests inside?" Suyu asked with a frown. He had already sent a message to the Path Master in advance, and the latter should be waiting for him here. "They've all been arrested." The shopkeeper sighed. Suyu raised his eyebrows. "Arrested? Why? Weren't they only searching for Qin Xiener and Su Kair? Why were they even arresting innocent people?" "It's all because—" The shopkeeper hesitated and pointed to the sky cautiously, implying that it was all because of the imperial edict that fell from the sky. "Anyway, the outsiders in the inn have all been labeled as suspects and have been arrested. They should now be locked up in the temporary prison outside the city and interrogated one by one. It turned out that the large-scale search last night had yielded nothing. So, they had changed to arresting the outsiders to see if they could find any relevant clues from them." Suyu frowned. This was really messing around. As such, Suyu had no choice but to leave the city. There was a huge formation outside the city, and it was at the level of the Master of the Heaven Law. Hundreds of millions of all kinds of living creatures were bound in the formation. All of them were caught last night. With that powerful formation, no one would be able to escape after being captured. Suyu hid in the dark, his gaze sweeping across the area. Very quickly, he discovered the Path Master who was traveling with him. The latter had a helpless look on his face as he waited for the Time Sovereign's personal guards to examine him. As Empress Star Reign's guard, he was naturally not a suspect. After searching his soul, he easily let him go. "Come here," Suyu said through telepathy. When the guard heard this, he immediately walked over calmly. "Lord Su, it's great that you're fine." He had assumed that Suyu had also been captured. The sacred city had really gone crazy yesterday. The people of the Time Ruler were everywhere, wantonly capturing people. Anyone who wasn't a local would be arrested. Yesterday, he had been perfectly fine at the inn, but a group of Sovereign's personal guards had taken him away. Suyu said, "Do you still have the proof of the Empress?" The latter nodded and took out a letter of authorization from Empress Star Reign. With this item in hand, one could represent Empress Star Reign in the wilderness of time and exchange contribution points for a corresponding sovereign treasure. "When does Milord plan to go?" "In another half a month, the wilderness of time will be off-limit." Suyu thought for a moment. Tonight. Every moment he delayed, Luo Xue would be in more danger. The sooner he could be rescued, the safer he would be. "Milord, be careful. After entering the wilderness of time, remember to abide by the rules inside. Don't act at will, or your life will be in danger." Suyu nodded. "I understand." After receiving the letter of authorization, Suyu was about to tell him to go back first. Suddenly, his eyes locked on a man and a woman in the formation. The man was a blind man, with his hands on the shoulders of a young and beautiful woman. Under the latter's guidance, he groped his way forward. Seeing these two people, Suyu's pupils shrank slightly. "Biyun Hongxian? Golden-eyed Langjun?" Suyu was surprised. He didn't expect to see these two in the sacred city. He wanted to come forward and greet them, but in the end, he gave up. Tonight, he was going to the wilderness of time, and it was not advisable to complicate matters. He restrained his breath and quietly left with the master of the path. Biyun Hongxian seemed to sense something, and a pair of golden eyes looked in the direction of Suyu's departure. "Hongxian, what are you looking at?" Golden-eyed Langjun asked when he sensed that Biyun Hongxian had stopped in her tracks. Biyun Hongxian shook her head. "Nothing." She felt that she had sensed wrongly, because just now, she seemed to have felt Suyu's gaze. "Don't get distracted. According to the original plan, we will enter the wilderness of time tonight and exchange for the ruler's treasure. If it goes well, we will not be noticed by the ruler," Golden-eyed Langjun said. Biyun Hongxian's expression became serious. She said, "After seeing the majesty of the ruler of time yesterday, Father, do you still think that we will succeed this time?" Although golden-eyed Langjun was blind, his heart was still cunning and intelligent. Don't worry, as long as we act according to my plan, everything will go smoothly. From then on, we will be the people that great Emperor Xiaohao can rely on the most. When he becomes the ruler of time one day, it will be the day that we will soar. Biyun Hongxian was not without doubts. Father, is this really okay? Your plan excludes Yanran, Biyun Hongxian said worriedly. Golden-eyed Langjun sneered. Do you still want to be under that woman? Along the way, she tried to kill you many times. Biyun Hongxian was silent. Indeed, both of them and Yanran were ordered by Xiaohao to come to the sacred city to exchange for the ruler's treasure. But along the way, Yanran showed her murderous intent more than once. Even after arriving at the sacred city, she left the two of them behind and went to the upper palace. I think it's better for father to make a new plan. I always feel that that woman is not so easy to deal with. Golden-eyed Langjun had an air of arrogance about him. Don't worry, I have everything planned out. It is foolproof. Night. 9 moons shone brightly in the sky above the sacred city. Compared to the previous night's wild manhunt in the sacred city, it was exceptionally quiet today. In front of the Hall of Masters, Su Yu stood in front of the stairs and stared at the seemingly ordinary hall. He was secretly shocked. At first glance, it was indeed an ordinary hall that could not be any more ordinary. But only the Time Realm experts could sense the extraordinariness of this hall. These bricks and tiles were no ordinary object. They were formed from the power of the time domain. The hall was in front of him, but in fact it was not in the space and time in front of him. Instead, it was in another space and time. No one could damage a brick or a tile of the Master Hall unless they had the ability to destroy even the space and time of the past. Chapter 26-27. If he was not careful, he would be lost in it, never to come out again. Who are you? Su Yu had just arrived at the door of the Hall of Gods when someone shouted at him. Looking up, it was the giant door of the Hall of Gods that was speaking. A 5-colored mouth appeared on the giant door. It was the one speaking. The Star Rain Empress has sent an envoy to exchange for the Master's treasure. Su Yu took out the letter of authorization. Swoosh! The letter of authorization flew out of his hand and into the mouth. As it chewed, it slowly nodded. The letter of authorization is not here. You may enter. Come here and be inspected. As it spoke, the giant mouth slowly opened. Inspection? Su Yu's eyes slowly narrowed. He had never heard of the so-called entry test when he had learned about it beforehand. What are you hesitating for? Come here quickly. The giant mouth urged. Since yesterday, the Master has personally arranged for an inspection. All those who enter must have their identities checked. The Master must have caught Luo Shui and taken precautions to prevent anyone bold enough to barge into the Hall of Gods to rescue Luo Shui. Su Yu hesitated there. The inspection of this giant mouth should be able to see through the bamboo hat, right? It could even detect the 8 great domains in his body. Once his identity as the successor of the ancient god Jiulong was exposed, Su Yu could not imagine what the consequences would be. Why are you hesitating? Is your identity suspicious? Crash! 2 clay men walked out of the giant door. They looked simple and crude, but each of them exuded an extremely ancient aura. There was a hint of primordial spirit in that aura. Su Yu's pupils shrank slightly. Were these puppets made from the soil at the beginning of the world? The cultivation of each puppet was frighteningly high, as strong as the peak of the Earth Master level. Su Yu was sure that if he wanted to escape, he was afraid that if he turned around, he would be smashed into pieces. His mind was racing. What should he do now? He was in a dilemma. After a moment's thought, he stepped forward and entered the giant mouth. Instead of being killed by the 2 clay men, it was better to think of a solution in the giant mouth. As soon as he entered, beams of purple light shot towards him. He instinctively wanted to dodge, but the voice of the giant mouth sounded in his ears. Don't move. Be inspected, or you will be treated as suspicious and killed." As if responding to the giant mouth's words, the rays of purple light turned into peerless sharp rays. Suyu held his breath and tried his best to gather all the 8 great domains in his body in his abdomen, compressing them into a single point. Whoosh! The first ray of purple light pierced through his body without any resistance. Physical examination: ordinary human race bloodline, ghost race bloodline, dragon race bloodline, and impure bloodline. Physical fitness, low. Then, the second beam of purple light shot over. Suyu suddenly felt as if something had passed through his soul. Soul inspection. High-quality soul, tenacious and after marriage, pure and extraordinary soul power. There was a hint of surprise in the giant mouth's voice. It was obvious that Suyu possessed a powerful soul that was incompatible with his human body. Domain detection. Another beam of purple light shot toward Suyu's body, searching for possible domains. Suyu could clearly feel a consciousness spreading from his head to the rest of his body. Neck, chest, abdomen. Every place was checked very carefully, and it was impossible to miss anything. It was probably because of Suyu's previous performance that the giant mouth was suspicious of him. Hence, the examination was extremely slow and meticulous. The consciousness was getting closer and closer to his abdomen. Seeing that it was about to be detected, Suyu's heart sank. If it was really detected, he would have to try his best to escape. However, to Suyu's surprise, the consciousness had penetrated his abdomen. It did not detect the existence of the domain at all. When the consciousness finished checking Suyu's whole body, it still did not stop and checked again. But it still did not find the existence of the 8 domains. Well, the domain is the wind domain, and it is low grade. The giant mouth finally felt relieved. Identity inspection passed. Go in. Suyu walked into the depths of the Hall of Gods with some doubts. Following the tunnel in the mouth, he successfully entered the Hall of Gods. Inside the hall there was indeed a place with abnormal time and space. From the outside, the Hall of Gods was in a bustling sacred city. But when he was here, he found that there was a long river near the Hall of Gods. Suyu was no stranger to that long river. It was the Time Reverse River. The Hall of Gods was by the river. A group of people with different cultivations were gathered by the river, talking to each other. Suyu's arrival attracted the attention of some of them. "Oh? It seems that we have another competitor." A creature with a sharp horn on his head cast a mocking look at him. His cultivation was not weak, reaching the later stage of nirvana. A human? That's strange. Which descendant of the Master Ruler appointed a human to take on the important task of exchanging for the Master Ruler's treasures? Suyu did not say anything and looked at them silently. There were 9 people in total. From their positions, postures, and races, it was obvious that they did not belong to the same group of people. What a coincidence they all came together, Suyu said to himself. After coming to the sacred city for a while, Suyu had a general understanding of the entire time domain. The time domain under the rule of the Time Master was divided into 3 realms. Among them, the Dream Duan realm was one of them. In addition, there was the Heavenly Awakening realm and the Nether realm. The other 2 realms also had descendants of the Time Master, and there were more of them than the Dream Duan realm. The group of people in front of him should be from the Heavenly Awakening realm and the Nether realm. For some unknown reason, people from the 2 realms chose to go to the sacred city at the same time to exchange for the Master Ruler's treasures. Could there be a secret that the Dream Duan realm did not know? Deep in thought, Suyu went to a corner and did not talk much with them. "Brother, are you the representative of one of the Time Masters of the Dream Duan realm?" A red-haired middle-aged man walked over with a smile. He was talking to Suyu amiably. "I am the representative of the Heavenly Awakening realm, the Red Snow Sword of the Brahma Heaven Great Emperor. I am here to collect the Master Ruler's treasures," the red-haired middle-aged man said with a smile. His expression did not show the contempt that the other creatures had for the human race. Su Yu said calmly, the representative of the Star Rain Empress of the Dream Duan realm, Su Yu. He did not trust him much because of the other party's attitude. Could someone sent by the Brahma Heaven Great Emperor to collect the Master Ruler's treasures be a simple-minded person? Obviously not. Oh, it's you, Su Yu. There was a subtle flash of contempt in the Red Snow Sword's eyes. The reputation of the Star Rain Empress was well known even in the Heavenly Awakening realm. It was said that she was the weakest in all aspects among all the descendants of the Time Master. She had not even awakened her bloodline. There was no hope for her to compete for the position of the Master. I wonder what grade of the Master Ruler's treasures are you planning to exchange for? The Red Snow Sword asked with a smile. Su Yu said calmly, it's barely enough to exchange for it. What grade is it? The lowest grade to exchange for was 300. Only 300? Chapter 26-28. Hee, Brother Red, if I were you, I wouldn't even bother to ask. Empress Star Rain being able to gather 300 contribution points is already unprecedented, and yet you're still looking forward to her contribution points. A being with half black and half light chuckled softly. Su Yu glanced at him indifferently. His contribution points were 500. He didn't know if it was considered high or low among all the descendants of the Masters. Don't mind her, Su Yu. Dark Sky Deity is this kind of person. Red Snow Sword comforted him and took the opportunity to leave. Obviously, he had also lost interest in Su Yu. Perhaps 300 contribution points was too far from his expectations. The group of people was still waiting here. To go to the Time Wilderness, they had to take the boat specially built by the Time Master. Otherwise, none of them would be able to go against the flow of time. As they waited patiently, several days passed. Su Yu's mood became more and more anxious day by day. Half a month later, a small boat slowly went against the flow of time at the end of the long river. On the boat stood a clayman. His cultivation was similar to that of the guards at the gate. The clayman rowed and slowly approached the shore. Red Snow Sword, Dark Sky Deity, and the others were a little excited as they came to the shore and jumped onto the boat. Su Yu also jumped on and waited for the boat to set sail. Just then, two more figures passed through the giant mouth and arrived in the hall. Looking over, it was none other than Zhang Xian. It was golden-eyed Lang Jun and Bai Yun Hongxian. Su Yu pressed down on his bamboo hat and couldn't help but be surprised. Why did they come together? Did they also represent the descendants of the Masters? Crash! Just then, another figure arrived. It was none other than Yanran. She walked a few steps quickly and rushed in front of golden-eyed Lang Jun and the others. Without looking back, she said, "Listen to my instructions along the way." Golden-eyed Lang Jun and Bai Yun Hongxian nodded, not daring to refute. Su Yu saw this. It turned out that after coming to the 8-star civilization, they had joined Xiaohao's forces. He sat quietly on the side of the boat, not saying a word. After Yanran and the others boarded the boat, they did not recognize Su Yu. She glanced around and found that only a few people had not concealed themselves. The rest were all hidden. For a moment, she was not sure if Su Yu had come here. Crash! The boat left the shore and led the people upstream against the flow of time. Along the way, scenes of the past could be seen lingering in his mind. These images recorded the experiences of the Time Sovereign. Most of his time was spent cultivating and living a peaceful life. But the further they went, the closer it was to the beginning of the Great Era, the more horrifying those experiences became. Scenes of the Time Sovereign battling the various mighty beings of heaven and earth, as well as the various peerless powerhouses, flashed before his eyes. None of the images showed the Time Ruler's face. All he could see was the back of the Time Sovereign. Any powerful enemy would be reduced to dust under the suppression of that valiant figure. Finally, when the boat arrived at its destination, in the distance an extremely vast scene entered everyone's eyes. Once again, it was the Sovereign of Time battling the enemy. What was different was that the time ruler was accompanied by a gloomy young man holding a 9-colored ruler. The two stood side by side. At the same time, he was facing an ice-cold woman wearing a black cloak and a phoenix coronet. The latter's entire body was burning with endless black flames, burning the world to pieces. In the eyes of the black-robed woman, the vast expanse and the great earth were like mud pellets. As for the time ruler and the young man with the 9-colored ruler, they exuded a peak aura of destruction. The two supreme existences stared at each other in another space and time. The invisible collision between them created a peerless aura that could destroy the world. Before the boat even got close, the bow of the boat creaked. It became extremely difficult for the boat to move forward. The clay man used all of his strength to barely push the boat forward. But the further they went, the more terrifying the aura became. Everyone on the boat felt suffocated. They even had the urge to kneel and worship it. That was just a scene from the past. An entire era had passed since then. However, the remaining pressure still posed a great threat to them. The clay man growled, his body exuding a thick aura of absolute beginning, forcefully stared at the terrifying pressure. Only then did everyone feel slightly better. But even so, their hearts still beat wildly. Looking at the scene in front of them, they felt that the battle in the scene was not in the distant past. It was right in front of them. Dong, finally, the boat reached the shore with difficulty. Under the protection of the clay man, they successfully reached the shore. After reaching the shore, the pressure disappeared without a trace. But there was still a lingering fear in everyone's eyes. It's too terrifying. Is that a war of that level? War? You think too much. They just stood there and looked at each other. They haven't fought yet. If they had fought, we would have died just now. Hearing this, everyone was even more shocked. A war of that level, even if separated by an era, could still kill all of them in the future. Who are those people? Are they the supreme existences in the world? Among them, perhaps only Su Yu understood. The woman in black was the fallen ancient god Jiyo, and opposite her was the time ruler. The other was Xiaoyao, son of heaven, and it was Xiaoyao, son of heaven. Xiaoyao, son of heaven, and the time ruler joined forces to kill the ancient god Jiyo. This was the truth of the past. In the early years of the era, the ancient god Jiujiu seized the fortunes of the 8 rulers, so that the 8 rulers could not break through to another level. The 8 great ancient gods took the opportunity to rise and become existences above the rulers. With the strength of the rulers, it was impossible to defeat the ancient gods. There must have been another more powerful force involved. Now the truth was clear. It was the stone-birth son of heaven. They personally attacked and killed several ancient gods. The remaining ancient gods hid in the Tao abyss, never to see the light of day. The entire 8-star civilization, many ancient god realms, were all occupied by the rulers, and they had been constantly excavating and mining. The rulers hoped to find back the destiny that had been taken from them by excavating the resources of the ancient god realm. In order to break through the shackles and become an existence with strength comparable to the ancient gods. But so far, no ruler had succeeded. That was why the time ruler was so eager to catch the descendants of the ancient god Jiyo. Even if the sacred city was in chaos, they had to catch Qin Xianer and Su Kai. Su Yu clenched his fist. He would never allow Xianer to fall into their hands no matter what. Look. That is Tianluan Mountain, where the ruler's treasure is. Someone suddenly saw a snow mountain rising from the ground in the distance. On the mountain stood a green pine tree. The tree was covered with sealed magic treasures. There were 79 in total. At this time, the voice of the clay man came from behind. Chapter 26-29. You can only take the treasures corresponding to the ruler, understand? Everyone nodded. Even without the clay figurine's warning, they wouldn't dare to take treasures that were worth more than their contribution points. Otherwise, the consequences would be dire. Looks like you understand this very well, but I still have to explain, the clay figurine said. If you take treasures that are worth more than your contribution points, you will be attacked by the time wilderness. When that time comes, all of you will die here. No one will be spared, understand? Everyone's pupils constricted upon hearing this. The dark heavenly god asked, "Wait? If someone else takes it, we will also be implicated, right?" The clay figurine replied indifferently, "Yes. The power of the time wilderness is too powerful. Unless a ruler is present, no one will be able to control it. Once it is activated, it will be an indiscriminate and destructive attack." Everyone drew a sharp intake of breath upon hearing this. Weren't the consequences a little too severe? If one of them made a stupid mistake, everyone would be buried with him. Now, everyone who was about to charge forward was hesitant and didn't dare to do so. If a group of people charged forward and one of them made a mistake, everyone else wouldn't be able to escape even if they wanted to. If they stayed here, they would still be able to hide in the small boat before the disaster struck. The dark heavenly god pondered for a moment before saying, "How about this? Each of us will go alone, and we'll draw lots to decide who goes first." Everyone would take turns going alone. If someone made a stupid mistake, they would only be harming themselves and wouldn't be able to affect anyone else. Unfortunately, no one responded to him. "That's easy for you to say. The first person to go will be able to exchange for the best treasures of the same level. It's not fair to just draw lots." The red snow sword shook its head. It was also a treasure that required 300 contribution points. There was a difference in power between the treasures. The first person to go would naturally have an advantage. Those who went later could only suffer in silence. Who would be willing to draw lots to decide who went first? The dark heavenly god harumphed. "Then what do you think we should do?" Just as everyone was debating, two figures emerged from the crowd. They were by Yun Hong Xian and Golden Eye Gentleman. The latter laughed. "Please wait here, I'll go first." Everyone's expressions shifted. Who would be willing to wait here foolishly? So be it. I hope the special cultivator doesn't do anything stupid. The more contribution points he has, the bigger the treasure. Dark Sky Deity gritted her teeth and charged forward. Just like that, the people who hadn't reached an agreement immediately swarmed over. Su Yu took a step forward, but when his gaze fell upon the golden-eyed Lang Jun and his daughter, he hesitated before taking a step back. He might not understand others, but how could the golden-eyed Lang Jun not understand him? He was a man full of ambition and scheming. Just now, there was a chance that they could reach an agreement, but it was golden-eyed Lang Jun who took the initiative to ruin it. As a result, everyone rushed over. Su Yu would never believe that he had no ulterior motive. They were about to reach the tree. Su Yu's heart stirred, and a beautiful space domain was displayed. His body turned into a puddle of water. In an instant, he arrived under the tree. Yen Ran also arrived at the same time. She looked at Su Yu in surprise, then suddenly realized something. "You really came?" Apart from Su Yu, who else could use her space domain? Su Yu nodded hurriedly. Before the others arrived, he immediately took out Empress Star Rain's proof of contribution and placed it on the highest treasure. It was a purple ring, carved with the insights of many path masters. Traces of destructive power seeped out from it, turning into purple light that scattered all over the sky. Half of the sky was occupied by the purple light. It was the third-ranked treasure among all the Dominator treasures. It required 500 contribution points. Dark Sky Deity, who saw this scene from afar, cursed angrily, "Retreat! He's up to no good." Red Snow Sword's eyelids twitched wildly. Without thinking, he turned around and fled. His heart was also filled with anger. Did the representative sent by Empress Star Rain think that if I can't get it, no one else can either? His contribution points were pitifully low, but he deliberately took the third-ranked ring, hoping to take the opportunity to trigger the attack of the time wilderness. The people who were swarming over immediately retreated like the tide. Golden-eyed Lang Jun, who was being carried by Yun Hongxian, kept retreating. In a low voice, he said, Hongxian, what's going on? Bai Yun Hongxian pursed her lips and said, someone has arrived first and is preparing to trigger the attack of the Time Wilderness. What? Golden-eyed Langjun had a murderous look on his face. Damn it, who ruined my plan? Everyone ran for their lives, fearing that the formation behind them would attack them. However, to their surprise, the formation of the Time Wilderness had not been activated for a long time. When they looked back, Su Yu had taken off the purple gold ring and was holding it in his hand. It had not triggered any attack from the Time Wilderness. Everyone was stunned for a moment, but then they understood. Could it be that Empress Star Reign's people have successfully obtained 500 contribution points? That's impossible. Red Snow Sword was the most shocked. Our Empress only obtained 430 points. 430 points was already the highest among them. Unexpectedly, Su Yu's was even higher. It had reached 500 points. Put it down. That treasure is mine. Dark Sky Deity was furious. Before he came, the descendant of the Dominator had told him that he must obtain the third-ranked Purple Light Killing Ring. With this ring, he would be invincible in the battle for the Dominator. As for the first-ranked and second-ranked treasures, no one would be able to obtain them, because the required contribution points were astronomical, and no descendant of the Time Master could collect them. But they had already retreated a lot, putting a long distance between them. Su Yu had plenty of time to leave. He looked at Yanran beside him. She was still hesitating about which treasure to choose. Su Yu pondered for a moment, then grabbed her shoulder and said, "Come with me." Yanran said in surprise, "Wait, Senior. I haven't chosen yet." "It's too late." As she cried out, Su Yu activated the space domain and fled. He did not return to the ship, but instead headed deep into the Time Wilderness. Yanran was furious, even if she respected Su Yu and wanted to borrow his strength. But Su Yu had taken her away from the Dominator's treasure without permission, causing her to lose her first choice. She could not help but be angry. That was the key to determining the outcome of the battle between the descendants of the Dominator. Su Yu had ruined it. "Let go of me!" Yanran shouted, struggling to break free from Su Yu's hand. Especially when she found that the group of people had already reached the snowy mountain and had begun to exchange for the Dominator's treasures, she was anxious and resentful. She wanted to slap Su Yu on the spot. How could he be so despicable? Chapter 26:30. Soon, the tree completely disappeared from sight. Only then did Su Yu slowly stop and stand in front of a mountain peak. He turned and looked into the distance. Yanran was released, and her face was full of anger. "Senior, what do you mean by this? Are you deliberately making an enemy out of Xiaohao?" Su Yu raised his finger and pointed into the distance. "Take your time and you will understand." "Look at what?" Yanran stared into the distance, but there was nothing there. At this moment, on the snowy mountain, everyone swarmed over, almost scrambling to exchange their certificates for the Dharma treasures they needed. Everyone was very cautious. They would only take treasures that were lower than their contribution points, and they would not dare to overstep their boundaries. However, there was one person who exceeded everyone's expectations. That was the golden-eyed gentleman. At his command, Biyun Hongxian flew to the top of the tree and picked up the number 1 treasure. Seeing this, the rest of the people turned pale with fear. It was impossible for anyone to gather enough contribution points for the number 1 treasure. The Dark Sky Deity was furious. "Put it down." With a roar, the Dark Sky Deity's body erupted with 2 opposing forces, darkness and light. Light and darkness, the 2 forces annihilated each other, turning into a blurry state of ashes that rained down on Biyun Hongxian. The power was comparable to that of a Path Master. Biyun Hongxian was only at the level of a Yellow Path Master, so how could she avoid it? However, at the critical moment, Biyun Hongxian avoided it as if she had foreseen it. The attack that was supposed to kill missed. Then, she casually stretched out her hand and plucked the most powerful Dharma treasure. As soon as the treasure left the tree, the wilderness of time began to shake violently. The clear sky suddenly turned into a sea of fire. Countless flames fell from the sky, pouring over everything within a radius of billions of miles. The terrifying flames were enough to destroy everything. Even if a Path Master was here, he would be annihilated in an instant. The dark sky deity turned pale with fright. She did not even care about the treasure in her hand, and crushed an extremely high-grade life-saving treasure. The treasure engulfed her figure, and before the flames fell, it turned into a residual shadow and flew towards the small boat. However, before she arrived, a sea of fire descended on the shore. A blood-curdling wail erupted, and even the powerful heavenly god was instantly incinerated into nothingness by the sea of flames. The same scene appeared in every corner. In this moment of crisis, all of the hegemon descendants used secret arts to flee for their lives. But in the end, without exception, they were all engulfed into ashes by the raging flames that fell from the sky. Ah! You two bitches! Endless screams, countless hateful curses, and countless ashes interweaved in the raging inferno. Only an extremely small number of sovereign representatives were fortunate enough to avoid the flames and escape into the depths of the wilderness of time. As for Golden-Eyed Playboy and Bai Yunhong Xian, they were able to predict the future. Every step they took was in front of the falling flames. As if he was walking on flat ground, he easily avoided all the descending flames. Before the entire land was engulfed in flames, he calmly left that area. Looking back, it had turned into a living hell. All of the hegemon representatives had perished here. As for the pine tree with the sovereign treasure sealed within it, it was burned to a crisp by the time wasteland attack. The many Dharma treasures on it all flew in all directions like shooting stars. Golden-Eyed Playboy raised his head, his eyes following one of them. That one, go after it. That was the number one sovereign treasure. Although Bai Yunhong Xian had taken it just now, she had not been able to get it. The moment the raging inferno descended, the treasure flew out of her hands. Bai Yunhong Xian nodded and hurried over. At the same time, on a distant mountain peak, Yanran, who had been furious, stood where she was, her face pale. She could not help but tremble in fear. In her senses, the auras of the representatives of the hegemons disappeared one after another. All of them had perished in the sudden heavenly fire. Suyu said slowly, "Do you know why now?" Yanran came back to her senses and knelt down without hesitation, kowtowing repeatedly. "Senior, I am unable to repay you for saving my life." How could she not understand that Suyu had noticed something was amiss, so he had immediately taken her away? Otherwise, she would not have been able to escape in time if she had stayed to pick up the items. Recalling how she had almost spoken harshly to Suyu, Yanran's face was full of shame. She kept apologizing. "I was foolish, please punish me, Senior." Suyu's expression was indifferent. "For the sake of our acquaintance, I saved your life." As soon as she looked up, she saw a meteor flying over her head. Suyu reached out and grabbed it. A space domain descended and grabbed it. When he took it back to his palm, he saw that it was a talisman. The talisman was an early-stage Heaven Law Master-level defensive treasure. Once it was used, it could block a blow from the Heaven Law Master. It was one of the lowest-level sovereign magical treasures in existence. Suyu put it in his pocket and stared at the scattered stars in the sky. He said, "If you don't mind, can you come with me to search for those scattered treasures?" Yanran also noticed that many sovereign treasures were scattered in all directions, waiting for people to snatch them. Among all the sovereign representatives, only Suyu, Yanran, and a few others were left. All of those treasures belonged to them. Yanran's heart skipped a beat. She was wild with joy. "As you wish, Senior." Suyu's eyes flickered as he fled in all directions with Yanran in his arms. In fact, Suyu's target was not the sovereign treasures. He was looking for Luo Shui in the process of searching for the sovereign treasures. The reason he brought Yanran with him was that he wanted to use her identity as the descendant of the Space Master to hide his space domain ability. Otherwise, he would have used the space domain alone. The Time Master would have been able to detect the abnormality of Su Yu's identity immediately. On the contrary, with Yanran around, even if the Time Master saw it, he would take it for granted that it was Yanran's space domain. After all, they were in the wilderness of time. Su Yu had to be cautious. The two of them were chasing a star, speeding through the wilderness. Just like its name, the wilderness of time was barren. There was no existence of time at all. Everything was the same. They were speeding here, unaware of the passage of time. Su Yu took the opportunity to search for Luo Xue. Along the way, he occasionally found many people who were exiled here. They were probably like Luo Xue, people who were valued by the Time Master and thus trapped here. Unfortunately, Luo Xue was not among them. After an unknown period of time, they finally caught up with the speeding star. When he grabbed it, he saw that it was a low-level offensive treasure, which looked like a staff. It was also a one-time offensive treasure, containing the strength of an early-stage Heavenly Law Master. Su Yu grabbed it and threw it to Yanran. Chapter 26:31. Su Yu said, "Take it, there are still many more treasures behind." Only by giving her some benefits would she have something to accompany Su Yu in his search for Luo Xue. Su Yu stared at the place where the second star had fallen and continued to move forward. Yanran was eager to try and look forward to it. Soon, the second star was found. It was a treasure worth 400 contribution points. Among the 49 treasures, it was considered a mid-level treasure. However, it was an auxiliary treasure, and its function was to forcefully take away a treasure of the same level from the opponent. Su Yu accepted it, and Yanran did not have any objections. Then, he found the third treasure. Su Yu gave it to Yanran, and the latter beamed with joy. The two of them ran here and there, looking for scattered Dominator treasures. Half a day later, they had found 20, almost half of all the Dominator treasures. However, Luo Xue was still nowhere to be found. Could it be that Luo Xue was not exiled in the wilderness of time? Su Yu thought to himself. Right at that moment, Yanran suddenly raised her eyebrows and said in surprise, "Strange, they are still alive." She flew over and stood on a cliff. Looking down at the canyon beneath his feet, he could vaguely see two silhouettes carefully picking up a fallen star. "You too. Come here." Yanran's face turned cold as she scolded them. The faces of the golden-eyed playboy and Biyun Hongxian changed, and they looked at the top of the cliff in awe. "Lord Yanran!" Biyun Hongxian pursed her red lips slightly, and a trace of panic flashed in her eyes. The golden-eyed playboy was slightly calmer, and he said with a smile, "Lord, you are safe and sound. We can finally rest assured." The father and daughter took the star, flew up the cliff, and stood in front of Yanran respectfully. The golden-eyed playboy held up the Dominator treasure and handed it over, saying, "Lord Yanran, please accept it." Yanran did not take it, but stared coldly at Biyun Hongxian. His eyes were filled with a cold light. Traces of murderous intent could be faintly seen in them. "Let me ask you first, how did you two survive?" Yanran squinted and asked suspiciously. "Even Dao Lords would die a graveless death before such might, let alone two tiny Dao Lords like them?" Golden-eyed Langjun had a look of lingering fear on his face. "Sir, you may not know this, but my father and I are proficient in some secret technique. We were lucky enough to escape from the fire." The suspicion on Yanran's face dissipated. She knew that this pair of father and daughter had extraordinary abilities. Otherwise, Xiaohao wouldn't have asked them to follow him to the holy city to retrieve the treasure. Is that so? In that case, do you know what caused such a drastic change? The golden-eyed gentleman seemed to have been prepared for this. He replied smoothly, "Reporting to my lord, it was a ruler's representative. He coveted a high-grade ruler's magic treasure and plucked it without permission. This caused the wilderness of time to attack him." Yanran frowned. She looked at golden-eyed Langjun. although she knew very well that golden-eyed Langjun was hiding something from her. But on the surface, there was nothing wrong with his answer. When Yanran looked at the ruler's magic treasure, she discovered that its grade was not low. It was a sovereign sword that ranked in the top 10. The might of this sword was comparable to a peak early-stage heavenly Tao Lord, and it was one of the most powerful treasures. Yanran's expression softened a little. She reached out and grabbed it, saying, "Thank you," but right at that moment, Su Yu's soft voice sounded in her ears. "Don't touch that sword." But right at that moment, Su Yu's soft voice sounded in her ears. "Don't touch that sword." After experiencing the threat of death once, Yanran firmly believed in Su Yu's words. Almost at the instant he retracted his palm, a jade centipede with wings crawled out from under the sword. It was also a ruler's magic treasure. But it was of the lowest grade, and it contained the poison of a early-stage heavenly law master. Not to mention biting it, even coming into contact with its poison would kill one on the spot. Creak! The centipede let out a fierce shriek as it missed its bite. It spread its wings and pounced towards Yanran with incredible speed. Yanran had already collected her thoughts. She took out a mirror with a cold look on her face. The mirror was a low-grade ruler's magic treasure, and it was a defensive treasure. The front of the mirror reflected the centipede. The latter immediately curled up, then petrified and fell to the ground, smashing into pieces. After being used once, the mirror also broke into pieces with a cracking sound. Yanran's face was cold. "How dare you?" She never dreamed that this pair of father and daughter would dare to harm her. If not for Su Yu's warning, she would have been hit. Golden-eyed Longjuan's hollow eyes glanced coldly at Su Yu. Meddlesome guy. Speaking of which, it was this person who had taken Yanran away in advance. That was why Yanran was able to escape. In his plan, all the ruler's representatives, including Yanran, had to die. But Yanran was an exception. Before Yanran could attack in anger, golden-eyed Langjun took out a scroll. There was an unknown bird drawn in the scroll. Golden-eyed Langjun threw it into the sky, and the bird flew out immediately, carrying the father and daughter away. Yanran was furious. She took out the attacking middle-level ruler's magic treasure and was about to activate it. But Su Yu stopped her. "Forget it, finding the magic treasure is more important. Let's talk about our grudges after we leave the Time Wilderness." Yanran was furious, but Su Yu's words were reasonable. Now was not the time to waste time. Of course, the real reason was that Su Yu had deliberately let Bai Yun Hongxian go. After all, they were old friends. On the flying bird, Bai Yun Hongxian stood at the tail. Her pair of golden eyes stared at Su Yu, slightly frowning. Why did Su Yu stop Yanran? With a trace of doubt, Bai Yun Hongxian used her eye technique. Although Su Yu had hidden his true appearance, her eyes could see through the future and the past. With a little effort, she could see Su Yu's past. A scene remained in her mind. It was when Su Yu had not hidden his identity and was with Qin Xianer. They had discussed with each other to rescue a woman named Luo Xue. After looking at it, Bai Yun Hongxian's eyes were full of shock. "Su!" She slowly closed her mouth and looked at her father behind her. Then, she quickly hid the surprise on her face. Su Yu. It was Su Yu. He still remembered her, so he stopped Yanran and let them go. Thinking of this, Bai Yun Hongxian's heart was filled with an indescribable joy and relief. It turned out that he had not forgotten her. All of a sudden, Bai Yun Hongxian seemed to have thought of something. She quickly plucked a feather from the bird. She sent a message through the feather, then threw it out. The feather flew silently behind her with the airflow. One of the feathers landed in front of Su Yu and fell into his arms. Su Yu picked up the feather thoughtfully and gently swept it. When he saw the content, his face changed. Chapter 26:32. Su Yu immediately raised his head and looked in the direction where Biyun Hongxian had left. The latter smiled at him. Su Yu waved at her gratefully. Yanran saw this and frowned. "Senior, don't be fooled by that little demon. She's not a good person." Su didn't quite understand why Yanran had such a deep prejudice against Byun Hongxian. She even wanted to kill her just now. In Su's memory, Byun Hongxian was actually very kind-hearted. She was the complete opposite of her sinister and vicious father. Well, let's go to another place. Su changed the subject. His eyes swept around and immediately fell in the southwest direction. He activated the space domain and rushed in the southwest direction. Half a day later, in a mountain range, there was a faint sound of scolding. Su remembered that voice. It was the voice of Red Snow Sword. "Get over there!" Red Snow Sword scolded. Su stopped and looked down. He found Red Snow Sword holding a whip, whipping a group of criminals imprisoned in the wilderness of time. They were being made to jump into a pool of boiling lava. The pool of lava was not formed naturally. It was caused by something extremely powerful hitting the ground. Was it a star? However, apart from the boiling lava in the magma pool, there was also a faint trace of extraordinary destructive power. It must have been the raging fire that fell from the sky just now that had merged into the pool of lava. Therefore, no criminal dared to go down. That was an existence that could burn an underground master into ashes in an instant. Who would dare to jump in? "You go down." Red Snow Sword was a little anxious. He kicked a criminal into the pool of lava. The latter was immediately burned by the raging fire. He screamed and struggled to climb up. However, Red Snow Sword stepped down and stepped him into the lava. "Don't think about coming out until you pick up that thing," Red Snow Sword scolded. His eyes flashed with a fierce light. Su saw it and secretly shook his head. This person was really not trustworthy. On the surface, he was kind, but when it came to interests, he showed his fierce side. However, Su was not concerned about him, but the criminals he had captured. Was Luo Xue among them? His eyes swept over them one by one, but there was no trace of Luo Xue. Could it be that he had been pushed into the magma pool and burned to death? Su immediately closed his eyes and tried to grasp Luo Xue's fate. A moment later, a ray of light appeared in his mind. His fate was unusually stable, indicating that he was not dead. "Senior, that pool of lava should contain a high-grade sovereign treasure," Yanran said with envy. If he could fish it up, Su was not in the mood to control the treasure, so he said, "There's no hurry. Let's look elsewhere." As he spoke, there was a sudden splash in the magma pool. A head popped out of the magma pool. A layer of hazy pink mist lingered on the surface of its head, making it look dreamy and illusory. Seeing her, Red Snow Sword revealed a hint of joy. "You got it?" The woman nodded. Under the protection of the pink mist on the surface of her body, she was unafraid of the boiling lava and slowly floated to the surface. That figure, that face, who else could it be but Luo Xue? It turned out that she was indeed forced to walk into the magma pool. It was only because the Red Dust Taoist Master's domain was protecting his body that he was not burned by the raging flames. Luo Xue held a fiery red ring in his left hand. It was the second-ranked sovereign treasure, the Tianluo ring. It contained the terrifying blow of a middle-stage heavenly law master. Apart from the number 1 ranked magic treasure, there was nothing else that could block this attack. Red Snow Sword snatched it, almost dragging Luo Xue to the ground. He held the Tianluo ring. His eyes filled with incomparable madness. "Good. Good. This is great. The Tianluo ring is mine." He threw his head back and laughed 3 times, showing his extreme excitement. When he calmed down, he looked at the group of prisoners in front of him with a smile. With a smile on his face, he said, "I've already obtained the item. You can all leave now." The prisoners were wild with joy, turning to flee in all directions. However, no one noticed that the Red Snow Sword had opened its mouth, and a small scarlet sword flew out of its mouth. Swoosh! The small sword flew out rapidly. With Red Snow Sword as the center, it drew a circular sword trajectory in the air. Then, the prisoners who had not yet escaped were all beheaded on the spot. Haha, I'm sorry. In order to keep the secret, I can only make you shut up for now. Red Snow Sword chuckled. Suddenly, he noticed that there was a figure still standing there. Eh? You're not dead yet? Red Snow Sword was at the early stage of void nirvana. Among the people in front of him, the strongest was only at the peak of Yellow Dao Master. Red Snow Sword looked at Luo Shui and said in surprise, "It's strange. Your dream realm domain can actually resist the burning of the fire. How rare." As he spoke, he secretly controlled the blood sword to stab out with his hands behind his back. Whoosh, with a sharp sword hum, the blood sword stabbed out. Luo Shui seemed to have expected such a sinister attack. The pink mist on the surface of her body turned into a shield and blocked it. This time, Red Snow Sword became serious. "That's not your domain. Who's hiding in your body?" Luo Shui said coldly, "Scram." But the moment she opened her mouth, she exposed her own weakness. There was no power in her words. She could clearly feel that Luo Shui was like a lamp that had run out of oil. "Is that so? What if I don't scram?" Red Snow Sword sneered and activated the blood sword again. Another terrifying sword shadow attacked. Luo Shui tried to forcefully condense the pink mist, but this time it was impossible. She had already used up a lot of the pink mist in the lava pool. Now that she had reached her limit, she no longer had the strength to mobilize the pink mist. Red Snow Sword sneered in his heart. This sword was enough to kill her. But at that moment, a space domain descended from the sky. The blood-colored sword shadow was immediately trapped in the center, unable to break through. Space domain. Red Snow Sword looked up and his expression changed. "It's you. How could he have overlooked Suyu, the first person to obtain the ruler's treasure?" And Yanran, who was beside him, was the descendant of the space ruler. Red Snow Sword waved his hand and the blood sword flew back into his palm. "Sir, why did you stop me from attacking?" Suyu landed in front of Luo Shui and said calmly, "It's enough for you to get the Tianluo ring. Why must you be so ruthless? Now that we know you have the Tianluo ring, are you going to kill us as well?" Red Snow Sword laughed. "My little friend, you must be joking. You and I are both representatives of the rulers. Why would we?" Just as the word "you" was in midair, the blood-red residual shadow that had been trapped suddenly burst forth with an intense blood-red light. It forcefully broke through the space domain's blockade and shot towards Suyu, who was close to it. Chapter 26:33. Swoosh. The blood-red sword shadow penetrated Suyu's body in an instant. Suyu did not resist at all, and was killed just like that. However, before the person could rejoice, his face stiffened again. Because after Suyu was killed, he turned into rays of light and dissipated. An illusion? No, not an illusion. Red Snow Sword said incredulously. He could confirm that what was killed just now was not an illusion, but a real existence. While he was in shock, he suddenly sensed a frightening aura of death behind him. Turning his head, he saw it was Suyu. He slapped his back with his palm. Red Snow Sword was shocked at first, but then he calmed down. A mere Nirvana realm existence dared to challenge him? "You overestimate yourself." Red Snow Sword turned and slashed. Their palms collided. What shocked Red Snow Sword was that his opponent's mysterious path power was not inferior to his. It was even slightly stronger than his own. Thud, thud, thud. The Red Snow Sword was forced back by the attack. Without thinking, he waved his blood sword. Just as he was about to attack, Red Snow Sword's body suddenly froze there, unable to move. His body, starting from his palm, split into particles the size of dust at a speed visible to the naked eye. It turned out that Suyu's palm just now was not an ordinary palm energy, but a palm that contained the space realm. After that trace of the space realm entered his body, it disintegrated his body from the inside out into countless particles. Ah! The latter let out a scream, trying to activate the Tianluo ring that he had just obtained. Yanran's eyes and hands were sharp. She used her space domain to teleport over and snatched the Heaven Luo ring. Even the Tianluo ring was gone. Red Snow Sword had nothing left to rely on. He screamed, "Stop, stop now. I have important information for the master representatives of the dream-interrupted realm." Suyu pondered for a moment, then waved his hand. The space realm began to stop activating. With a single thought, it could start again. "Don't try to deceive me, or you won't want to see the consequences," Suyu said lightly. He somewhat believed Red Snow Sword's words. Because the domain representatives of the Heavenly Awakening Realm and the Nether Realm had gathered together to pluck the Master's treasure. There must be some information that the Realm of Dream Divided Realm did not have. The Red Snow Sword was restricted by Suyu, so it didn't dare to act rashly again. It said dutifully, "The Great Master is seriously ill. In the Time Wilderness, there might be the Time Essence of the Great Master." Before Suyu understood what the Time Essence was, Yanran had already cried out in alarm, "Impossible! Quintessence is the lifeline of a hegemon. Only when a hegemon is about to perish will his quintessence be lost. The Time Sovereign should still be healthy. How could he be facing death?" This news was truly earth-shattering. The Time Sovereign was about to die. "I'm not lying to you. The two strongest princes and princesses of the Heavenly Awakening Realm and the Nether Realm have asked the Fate Chief Sovereign to divine that the Time Chief Sovereign is seriously ill. Their guess is that the injuries left behind in the past have flared up again." Su Yu's eyes flickered and he believed 80% of his words. This was because, in order to capture Qin Xianer last night, the Time Sovereign had rather ordered the entire city to search for her than personally appear. If he showed himself, he would be able to find Qin Xianer with just a thought. Why didn't he show himself? The reason was worth pondering. The explanation before him explained everything. However, Suyu did not dare to relax. The Time Sovereign was only seriously ill, not really dead. The decree didn't even contain the will of the Time Sovereign, and it was terrifying. Even if the Time Sovereign was dying, a thought could destroy the world. Where is the Time Essence? Yanran's eyes were burning with passion. It was something even more tempting than the treasure of the Time Sovereign. The Red Snow Sword looked at Suyu and said, "As long as you promise not to kill me, I can lead the way for you." Suyu thought about it and prepared to search his soul. The Red Snow Sword said, "Don't try to search my soul. I have already placed a talisman in my soul. Once someone searches my soul by force, my soul will destroy itself. At that time, no one will tell you the whereabouts of the Time Essence." He was still quite cautious. Suyu thought about it and nodded slowly. "Okay, I can promise you." The Red Snow Sword was relieved. He looked around and said, "Follow me." Suyu took out the flying treasure and carried all of them on it. The Red Snow Sword personally led the way, and Suyu finally had a chance to comfort Luo Xue. At the moment, Luo Xue was extremely weak. However, his weary eyes were still fixed on Suyu, and he did not even blink. Suyu looked into her eyes and said apologetically, "I'm sorry, I'm late." Luo Xue's eyes were red, and she sat in the treasure, crying silently. Suyu was deeply apologetic. She had protected Qin Xianer and Su Kai'er until now, and was finally captured by the Time Sovereign because of them. Fortunately, the Time Sovereign was seriously injured and had not interrogated Luo Xue. Otherwise, she would have suffered even more unimaginable harm. "It's okay now." Suyu patted her shoulder gently. "I will definitely get you out of here." Perhaps it was this sentence that crushed the last bit of strength in her heart. Finally, she could not help but lean on Suyu's shoulder and burst into tears. Years of sadness were vented at this moment. Suyu was speechless. He silently instilled mysterious path energy into her to help her recover from her injuries. Suddenly, Suyu inadvertently sensed that there was a consciousness in Luo Xue's body that was slowly awakening. "It's you. How could Su Yu forget the mysterious red dust path master? After the consciousness awakened, it went straight into Su Yu's soul. In Su Yu's soul, a sorrowful woman dressed in red was sitting on a willow tree. She stared at Su Yu and smiled gently. It's been a long time, Su Yu. Su Yu had a complicated look on his face as he said, "Thank you for protecting Luo Xue. Without her help, Luo Xue would have died in the lava pool." "Hee, I once said that I would help Luo Xue win your heart, do you remember?" The Red Dust Path Master said meaningfully. Su Yu certainly remembered. Before they parted in the Tao Tai's stomach, the Red Dust Path Master took over Luo Xue's body and escaped into the Star River. He swore that one day, Luo Xue would win Su Yu's heart. "It's impossible now," Su Yu said calmly. He already had Xian'er and their child. It was impossible for him to entrust his heart to another woman. Is that so? I think it's still possible. The Red Dust Path Master smiled mysteriously. Su Yu frowned. How could he be so sure? Very soon, you will understand. The Red Dust Path Master smiled faintly and withdrew from Su Yu's soul. Su Yu opened his eyes and saw Luo Xue's puzzled look. "Su Yu, what happened to you just now?" Luo Xue asked curiously. No matter how she called out to Su Yu, he couldn't hear her. "Oh, it's nothing," Su Yu said. His mind was filled with the lingering words of the Red Dust Path Master. Would he give his heart to Luo Xue? Or could it be that there was something else in his heart? Chapter 26:34. Looking at the endless wilderness of time, Su Yu thought about it slowly. How could he leave with Luo Xue? The clay man on the boat was the puppet of the Time Master. If he took the boat, would the Time Master detect him through the clay man? Or would he have to cross the river? "Senior, if you can help me get the essence of time, I have a way to send your friend away." In order to fight, Yanran gritted her teeth and went all out. She took out a necklace from her neckline. The necklace was adorned with 81 round beads. Each bead was full and carved with a character from the Heavenly Book. "This is a life-saving item given to me by the Space Master," Yanran said. "If all 81 pearls are activated at the same time, we can activate the space domain of a ruler. Perhaps we might even be able to break through this wilderness of time. If we are discovered by the Time Master, I can activate this thing and take you away with me," Yanran said. Originally, Yanran had no intention of taking it out. However, this trip to obtain the essence of time could easily be discovered by the Time Master. If necessary, this thing must be used. When she escaped, she could take Su Yu and the others away. Of course, this favor must be given, and she could get Su Yu's help. "Okay, but first tell me, what is the essence of time?" Su Yu asked. Yanran did not hesitate to be discovered by the Time Master to obtain this thing, so it must not be simple. She pursed her lips, pondered for a moment and said, "The essence of time has only one function, to accelerate the evolution of the time domain." Hearing this, Su Yu's eyes flashed slightly. As expected, he also wanted to obtain this thing. If he could upgrade the time domain to a high level, his strength would increase greatly. "Okay," Su Yu agreed. Yanran breathed a sigh of relief. After thinking for a moment, she opened her palm and reluctantly handed over the second-ranked Tianluo ring. "Give it back to you, Senior. It was Su Yu who defeated the Red Snow Sword just now, so this thing should naturally belong to him." Su Yu took it without hesitation. Glancing at the nonchalant Red Snow Sword, his fingertips swept across the space domain, and he opened the space storage that the Red Snow Sword had hidden in his arms. He took out all the things inside. The Red Snow Sword's face turned bitter. He thought Su Yu had overlooked it. 10. Yanran was surprised. There were a total of 10 Dominator treasures inside. They were all found by the Red Snow Sword alone. Su Yu casually took half of it and gave the other half to Yanran. She smiled and said, "Thank you, Senior." Of the 49 treasures, 30 had fallen into the hands of the 2 of them. The other 19 should be in the hands of golden-eyed Lang Jun and by Yun Hong Xian, who had planned this beforehand. Senior. Yanran wanted to say something but hesitated. Why don't you come with me and help Xiaohao ascend to the position of ruler? In that case, Xiaohao would be in control of all the treasures. Which descendant of a hegemon could possibly stand up to him? We'll talk about it later, Suyu said calmly. As the two of them conversed, Red Snow Sword suddenly stopped the boat and reminded them telepathically, "Look ahead." Suyu and the others looked forward. However, in the wilderness of time in front of them, a huge crater appeared for no reason. It was as if a meteor had fallen and smashed down. Inside the sinkhole, crystal-colored flames spread. At the bottom, there was a crystal drop that looked like a teardrop, lying there quietly. Red Snow Sword was excited. As the rumors say, the Time Master is seriously ill, and the time essence in his body has begun to wither. Yanran grabbed the drop of time essence with the power of the mysterious path. However, the strange thing was that the time essence seemed to be in another time and space. It was clearly in front of her, but Yanran couldn't catch it. Damn it! She tried many times in a row, but to no avail, which made Yanran a little anxious. The longer they stayed here, the more danger they would be detected by the Time Master. I'll do it. Suyu stood on the boat, staring at the sinkhole quietly. From his point of view, the flames in the sinkhole were emitting a power that interfered with time. It made time go forward, go backward, and freeze. Yanran didn't understand the time realm, so she couldn't avoid the interference. He stretched out his palm, and a time realm was slowly displayed. Freeze. The time in the surroundings, including the boat, was also frozen in time. His time realm was superior to the power of time of the flames. Therefore, it was easily suppressed. In this way, Suyu was unhindered. He raised his hand, and the drop of time essence flew back to his palm. When Suyu was about to look at it, suddenly, another drop of time essence emerged from the bottom of the sinkhole. Suyu looked at Yanran and the others, who were frozen, and flew to the bottom of the sinkhole. He took out the second drop of time essence that emerged. As a result, the third drop emerged from the same place. It was as if there was a spring under the ground, constantly gushing out the time essence. Suyu's eyes flashed, and he stepped on the ground with the tip of his foot, shattering the big earthquake. In a crack, he could clearly see a broken long hair buried in the ground. It was from the long hair that a steady stream of time essence emerged. Is this the hair of the Time Master? Suyu was shocked. Seeing that the time freeze was about to end, he hid the hair and the 2 extra drops of time essence. Then he returned to the flying boat as if nothing had happened, maintaining the posture of collecting the time essence. At this moment, the time freeze ended. Yanran only felt that Suyu in front of her seemed to shake, and then she saw the time essence in his palm. Fortunately, I didn't disappoint you. I got it. Suyu handed the time essence to her. The latter was pleasantly surprised, and a trace of doubt in her heart was washed away. Anyway, the time essence was in her hand, so why should she care so much? Okay, let's go, Yanran said hurriedly, not daring to stay after getting the time essence. Let's go back to the clay figurine boat first. If the Time Master can detect that Luo Xue has been taken away, it won't be too late for me to use the treasure of the Space Master. Suyu certainly had no objection. A drop of time essence in exchange for Yanran using the treasure of the Space Master was a good deal for him. However, the flying boat had just turned around. The sky above their heads suddenly turned fiery red. The sky was like a red-hot molten iron, pouring down in torrents. The attack of the time wilderness. They had touched something that they shouldn't have touched and alarmed the Time Master. Yanran's face was pale. She had no choice but to crush her own treasure of the Space Master. Suddenly, all 81 round beads exploded, and 81 lines of the heavenly book gathered together, condensing into a pair of giant hands made of words. The giant hands went up against the sky, grasped the sky, and then forcefully tore it apart on both sides. Crack! A crack was torn in the sky. Waves of familiar aura from the outside world poured in crazily. The half-real world of the Time Master was really broken. Chapter 2635. How could Su Yu and the others dare to hesitate? A group of people rushed out immediately. Yanran and Su Yu reacted the fastest. They activated the space domain at the same time and passed through the crack in an instant. Red Snow Sword was a little late. When he arrived at the crack and was about to go through, the sun in the sky suddenly turned into a cold and emotionless eye. Who dares to be so presumptuous in the half-true world? As soon as the words were spoken, thunder roared. The two palms that were made up of 81 characters were immediately shattered into sparks. The crack that had appeared closed immediately. No! Red Snow Sword yelled and rushed over. Unfortunately, he still failed. But Red Snow Sword was not worried about being trapped in the wilderness of time forever, but about facing that eye. It was formed by the will of the Time Master. Master, I am the representative of the heavenly awakening realm's Brahma Sky Great Emperor. I have come to exchange for the treasure of the Time Master. Please let me go, Red Snow Sword said in fear. The eye slowly closed and turned into a sun again. From beginning to end, it did not look at Red Snow Sword. It was as if in its heart, Red Snow Sword was just an ant. Red Snow Sword's whole body was wet with sweat. The Time Master did not say a word or even look at him, but he still had the illusion that he was walking on the edge of destruction. Fortunately, the Time Master did not care about him at all. That was why he was lucky enough to survive. He wiped the cold sweat off his body and prepared to return to the River of Time and take a small boat back. But just as he was about to leave, a sigh echoed between heaven and earth. When the tree falls, the monkeys scatter. I am not dead yet, and you dare to covet my essence of time? The voice came from nowhere, sweeping across heaven and earth. It could be heard in every corner. Red Snow Sword listened. He slowly closed his eyes, and the vitality and soul in his body suddenly disappeared like a candle flame being blown out. His body also turned into sparks and dissipated in the air. A sigh could kill people from thousands of miles away. Su Yu, Yanran, and Luo Shui escaped the crack with great difficulty. They found themselves in the sky above the sacred city. Not far below their feet was the entrance to the Hall of Masters. The two did not dare to hesitate and were about to leave. However, a faint sigh could be heard. Yanran screamed in pain, her body trembling uncontrollably. His soul and life force were diminishing at a visible rate. It was the same for Su Yu. He felt as if the flame of his life had been blown away by a gust of wind. Fortunately, the voice was extremely faint, almost undetectable. They only felt a momentary pain. Yanran's face was pale and there was a lingering fear on her face. Without a doubt, that faint sigh belonged to the ruler of time. Fortunately, she decisively activated the magic treasure and directly left the time wilderness. Otherwise, the consequences of facing the sovereign's sigh would be unimaginable. Su Yu composed himself and said, "Let's go back to the upper palace." The three of them returned. The two of them had a tacit understanding that they didn't mention what had happened in the wilderness of time to the other hegemon descendants. Only they themselves knew about the many treasures they possessed. In the guest room, Qin Xianer and Luo Shui hugged each other and cried, "I'm sorry, Sister Shui. I've made you suffer." Qin Xianer felt extremely guilty and didn't know how to make it up to Luo Shui. Su Kai was grinning from ear to ear, and her small face was overflowing with pleasant surprise. She looked at Su Yu with a gentler look and less indifferent look. Luo Shui was very familiar with the mother and daughter. She poked Su Kai's nose teasingly. "If you want to repay me, then be my daughter." "Okay, hee." Su Kai threw herself into her arms, smiling. "By the way, how long will I be gone?" Su Yu asked. Qin Xianer said, "Just one night." Just one night? He had waited in the Hall of Masters for half a month, and he had spent a lot of time in the wilderness of time. However, time was frozen in the wilderness of time. As a result, there was only one night left for Su Yu to leave. Why do you ask, brother Yu? Qin Xianer asked. Su Yu thought about it and said, I think the time ruler might really be at her limit. The time crystals of the transfer order, the falling hair. There was also the upcoming competition for the time ruler. Everything pointed to the imminent fall of the time ruler. However, why was the time ruler injured? After killing the ancient god Jiu, the time ruler should not have fought with any strong men. Where did the injury come from? I think the wilderness of time was prepared by the time ruler to delay the injury, Su Yu said. Only in the frozen domain of time would the injury on her body be fixed. Oh, Qin Xianer said with a poker face, in that case, the time ruler will not leave the wilderness of time easily. Su Yu was quite sure of this. For the next 6 months, everyone will cultivate here in peace, Su Yu said. He had to wait for the 9 moons to align in half a year, for the day when the ancient tomb of the demon faction appeared. After settling them down, Su Yu went to the secret room alone. He took out the hair of the time ruler. After a period of precipitation, 3 drops of time essence dripped from the hair. Together with the original 2 drops, there were 5 drops of time essence in total. Su Yu's eyes narrowed, trying to force more time essence out of the hair. However, none of the methods worked. It seemed that he could only wait for it to drip out. Just as he was thinking about other ways, a hoarse voice came slowly. Don't waste your energy. You can't do anything to the hair of the time ruler. The air trembled slightly, and a strange old man suddenly appeared in front of Su Yu. His gray hair almost reached his waist, giving off an extremely disheveled feeling. His eyes were also closed. It was such an old man who ignored the restrictions outside the secret room and appeared directly in front of Su Yu. The old man stood quietly in front of Su Yu with a walking stick. However, Su Yu's expression was very calm, and he was not surprised at the appearance of the old man. It seems that you knew I would appear? You even know who I am? The long-haired old man smiled calmly. Su Yu shook his head. There are only a few people who do good deeds without leaving their names. You are obviously not one of them. At first, when he passed through the test of the giant mouth, it was obvious that he was about to be detected in the 8 domains, but it was very strange that the giant mouth did not detect it. It was the same for both tests. At that time, Su Yu knew that there was an invisible expert secretly helping him. Otherwise, he would have been exposed long ago. Therefore, Su Yu had been mentally prepared that this expert might come to him. There must be a reason for the other party to help him. Oh, you are really smart. No wonder you can come out of the time wilderness alive. The long-haired old man laughed hoarsely. Su Yu said calmly, What I brought back from the time wilderness should belong to you, or what do you want? You can also say it. Chapter 26:36. He looked at the hair in Su Yu's hand, and then at Su Yu's space storage device. He knew everything that Su Yu had obtained, but he wanted it all. What I want is a favor from you, Su Yu said calmly. Elder, you are more than 100 times more capable than me. Why do you need to owe me a favor? He had thought that the old man wanted to help him because he wanted to obtain something from the wilderness of time. It turned out that was not the case. There is one thing that I can't do. I need you to do it for me. The old man slowly took out a wooden box. I hope you can bring the wooden box to someone. Su Yu's eyes flashed. Who? The old man smiled. When the master appears, the wooden box will react. You just need to carry it with you. Su Yu pondered for a moment and accepted the wooden box. As a token of appreciation, I can help you a little. The old man's fingers gently touched the hair. The black strands of hair turned transparent. It was visible to the naked eye, full of drops of time essence. There were as many as 100 drops. I have refined the hair for you. When the wooden box is handed over to the master, the time essence in the hair will flow out automatically. In other words, The 100 drops of time essence would only be handed over to Su Yu after he completed the task. After that, the old man smiled. I wish you good luck. After waiting for him to leave, Su Yu touched the wooden box in his palm. Why did he think that I would meet the person he was waiting for? Su Yu was suspicious. The old man's strength was too mysterious. What he had told him was also puzzling. He thought for a moment and tried to open the wooden box. According to what he had thought, there must be a powerful seal inside the wooden box, making it difficult to open. Unexpectedly, Su Yu opened the wooden box with a light flick. Su Yu was startled and immediately looked into the wooden box, but it was empty. After thinking for a moment, Su Yu tried to check the wooden box itself. It was made of precious divine wood. But it was not unusual. The mysterious old man's focus was not on the wooden box. Su Yu couldn't figure it out for a moment. It was a little strange. Why did the old man say that when the wooden box met the person it was intended to give, it would react? With some doubts, Su Yu kept the wooden box properly. For the 100 time essence in the strand of hair, just a wooden box was not a problem at all. The time essence in the hair couldn't be counted on for the time being. But there were still 5 drops of time essence. With a thought, the 5 drops of time essence lined up in the air. Su Yu's soul probed into the first drop of time essence. In an instant, a profound comprehension of time surged into his soul. After some time, Su Yu slowly opened his eyes, which were filled with shock. As expected of the Time Master, his comprehension of the realm of time is really extraordinary. Su Yu couldn't help but exclaim in admiration. He thought that his time domain was not bad. However, when he saw these insights, he realized that he had only scratched the surface of the Tao of Time. Time crystal. He made a grabbing motion with his palm. The eternal time of the world was grasped in Su Yu's palm. As he clenched his fist, the time actually condensed into a crystal. Su Yu was no stranger to such crystals. Time crystal. Su Yu's pupils contracted slightly. So this was how the time crystal came about. The Time Master could condense the time of the world into a crystal with a casual grab. Probably, in this world, apart from the Time Master, Su Yu was the second person who could create time crystals. Staring at the remaining time essence, Su Yu immediately closed his eyes, immersed himself in it, and continued to comprehend. Time passed slowly. Half a year later, in the training room where Su Yu was, there were already many time crystals that others coveted. There were no less than 300 million of them. However, the comprehension of half a year was not the most important thing. The most important thing was, Su Yu's finger gently tapped in front of him, and a figure flickered out. It was a figure that was very similar to Su Yu. However, if one looked closely, one could still see the obvious difference. That was, this illusory Su Yu seemed to be slightly more mature than the original Su Yu. Their cultivations were almost the same. The illusory Su Yu turned around, looked at the original body, and said with satisfaction, as expected of the Time Master, "You can even cultivate this kind of time incarnation." Yes, the illusory Su Yu was a kind of time incarnation. He could summon Su Yu from a few months or even a few years later to the present time. Unfortunately, due to certain limitations, the strength of the time incarnation summoned by Su Yu did not change much. If the Time Master used it himself, he could even summon himself from millions or tens of millions of years later. Moreover, at that time, he would have more powerful strength. However, Su Yu had an advantage that the Time Master could never achieve. That was, the time incarnation created by the Time Master could only last for a cup of tea's time at most. It would be crushed by the current time. But Su Yu was different. The time incarnation created by him was also integrated with the soul realms one thought to become real. In this way, his body could exist for more than a whole day. Original body, you have to strengthen your cultivation. If you can also summon your past self, it is equivalent to having the past, the present, and the future at the same time. 3 Su Yu, the time incarnation encouraged. 3 superimposed, it is terrifying to think about. 1 Su was already powerful, but 3 Su joined forces, and all 3 of them were connected. Each of them was resourceful and full of magical powers. That scene was probably a nightmare for any enemy. Su rolled his eyes. Will I be as talkative as you in the future? The Time Incarnation laughed. Fine, this is the first time we meet. When you are in trouble, you can summon me. After saying that, the Time Incarnation disappeared without the consent of the original body. This made Su smile bitterly. Is this a good thing or a bad thing? The Time Incarnation did not listen to the orders of the original body at all, and even regarded himself as the future incarnation, faintly superior to him. However, as the future incarnation had said, the strongest comprehension of the Time Master was that the future, the present, and the past appeared at the same time and space. It was equivalent to 3 Time Masters fighting. This was one of the things that the other Masters feared the most about the Time Master. In a sense, the combat power of the Time Master was the most invincible. I wonder if the essence of time in that hair contains the comprehension of the past incarnation. Su's eyes were full of expectation. After half a year of cultivation, Su had gained a lot. After calculating the time, he immediately came out. In the guest room, Qin Xianer, Su Ker Luo Shui, and Huang Fu were all cultivating seriously. With Su's huge resources and the occasional guidance of the incarnation, the 4 of them made rapid progress in their cultivation. Especially Qin Xianer. She was the descendant of the ancient god Jiu, so her cultivation was unique. She did not even need to cultivate. With the divine fire of the 9 serenities devouring all kinds of precious martial arts resources, she could break through the realm. Chapter 2637. What else could Su say besides feeling helpless about this kind of breakthrough method? Every time he broke through a realm, he would have to painstakingly search for all kinds of high-level martial arts resources. Qin Xianer, on the other hand, could break through without doing anything. Both of you are the descendants of the ancient gods. Why is there such a huge difference? Su was a little disappointed. Apart from giving him the divine 9-dragon cauldron, the ancient god Jiulong needed Su to fight for everything else. Even the most important 8 great domains of ancient god Jiulong had been achieved by Su himself, one step at a time, and he had experienced countless dangers before he succeeded. Qin Xianer giggled. What's mine is brother Yu's. Su laughed. At that moment, Yao Guang's voice came from outside the door. Senior, it's about time. Should we head out? Today was the 9 moons linked Pearl Day, and it was also the place where the demonic sect's ancient tomb might appear. The 7 hegemon descendants of the Upper Palace all wanted to explore the Devil Path's ancient tomb. Let's go. Su took a deep breath. Saving Yun Yazi had been Su's wish for many years. This time, he had to achieve his wish. Xian wait here quietly and don't leave the guest room, Su instructed. Half a year had passed, and the search for Qin Xian and Su Kai had long since died down. However, there was still plenty of time for the sovereign's personal guards to patrol the city. Don't worry, brother Yu, Qin Xianer said. She still had a sense of propriety. Su looked at Su Kai and said, Kai, stay with your mother and don't be naughty, understand? Su Kai tilted her head and said awkwardly, Oh. Kai, say goodbye to father, Qin Xianer said. Su Kai stubbornly pursed her lips and didn't say a word. Although they had spent some time together, Su Kai was still unable to accept him completely. It's fine. Su shook his head and used his gaze to stop Qin Xianer, who was about to criticize Su Kai. There's still a long way to go. Let's slowly mend our relationship. After leaving the guest room, Su followed Yao Guang to the Great Hall. Yanran, Luluo, and the other hegemon descendants were waiting there. Senior Su, I'll be counting on you this time. Luluo smiled shyly. Su nodded. No problem. The group of 8 arrived at the sacred city square. The place was already crowded with people. Many experts appeared one after another. Among them, there was no lack of early-stage Tao Lords. There was even a faint flicker of the aura of a mid-stage Tao Lord. Yao Guang and the others covered their bodies and faces with black robes. There would definitely be a mix of fish and dragons in this mission to kill the holy fiends. For many years, the Upper Palace had been enjoying all kinds of resources in the Holy City, which would more or less cause some experts to be envious. They didn't dare to do anything in the sacred city. However, that might not be the case in the chaotic scene of the capture of a Saint Fiend. Therefore, it was best for them to hide their identities and not be discovered by others. The appearance of the holy demon has attracted the attention of many experts, Yao Guang said in a low voice. Yanran nodded in agreement. Just from the people we recognized, there are famous experts from the Heavenly Awakening Realm, the Severed Dream Realm, and the Nether Realm. Apart from them, there are also many local leaders from the Holy City. These were just the ones they recognized. Look, the people from the Star Alliance Chamber of Commerce have appeared. Su Yu's heart shook and he followed Yanran's gaze. A group of experts of different ages gathered in a corner. Their clothing had the unique logo of the Star Alliance Chamber of Commerce. The Star Alliance Chamber of Commerce. Su Yu's eyes gleamed. The Star Alliance Chamber of Commerce had always been ambitious. It wasn't a good thing for them to join the siege of the Holy Demon. Experts from all sides gathered in the sacred city square one after another. When the sky began to darken and the 9 moons began to line up, however, it was obvious that the time domain, which had existed for eternity, was rapidly weakening. When the 9 moons lined up, the time domain was gone. The hourglass above everyone's heads disappeared at the same time. A sense of relief lingered in everyone's hearts. From the depths of the sky, a deep and indifferent voice reverberated. The holy demon is hiding in the southwest, 300 miles away. The voice rolled away. A bolt of lightning descended at that moment, bombarding the old district of the sacred city. Su Yu's eyes flashed slightly. It was indeed there. He had found the old district by following the demonic energy that day. Let's go. Yanran activated the space domain and arrived first with the people from the Upper Palace. In the end, when they used the space domain, there was someone who was one step ahead of them. That was the Star Alliance Chamber of Commerce. Each of them was holding an extraordinarily advanced space-time treasure, and they arrived first. Yanran was envious. The Star Alliance Chamber of Commerce was so generous. Looking down, they saw a pitch-black cave that had been pierced through by lightning, revealing itself in front of them. Wisps of demonic aura that could make one go berserk rose from it. The ancient tomb of the demon faction could indeed be here. Su Yu was filled with anticipation. After the Star Alliance Chamber of Commerce, he quickly entered the cave. After a long period of darkness, a faint light began to shine in front of him. At the end of the cave, a blood-red world came into view. Bolts of blood-red lightning flashed from time to time at the end of the world, illuminating the world as if it were blood. Under the illumination of the lightning, coffins could be seen neatly lined up. Every coffin was filled with a deathly aura that made one shudder. Where is this? Yao Guang and the others were bewildered. This was completely different from the hiding place of the holy demon. In his imagination, the hiding place should have gathered endless resources. Why was it all a cemetery? However, the people of the Star Alliance Chamber of Commerce were very calm and even a little happy. Finally found it, the ancient tomb of the demon faction. There were 10 people from the Star Alliance Chamber of Commerce. However, the other 9 people's postures were like stars surrounding the moon, placing the person who spoke at the center of it all. Yao Guang and the others were slightly surprised. They had heard of the famous ancient tomb of the demon faction. It was said that it was a huge and fierce dark force. When the leader of the force died, he would be buried in the ancient tomb of the demon faction. They had never thought that the ancient tomb of the demon faction would be under the holy city. Yanran's eyes flickered, and she made a grabbing motion with her hand. Then, she pulled out a burial item from the nearest coffin. A 30,000-year-old water pearl. Yanran could not help but exclaim. The water pearl was a crystal condensed by a water soul demon at the level of an earth master. Its function was to heal soul injuries. In the outside world, a 3,000-year-old water pearl could be sold for a sky-high price. At its peak, it could even reach 10 billion time crystals. In front of him, with a casual grab, he actually took out a 30,000-years-old water pearl. Its value was already an astronomical figure. No one in the entire time zone could afford it. This action shocked the other descendants of the rulers, and they opened the coffins one after another. In the end, there were shocking burial objects in all the coffins. Even the worst had billions of time crystals. At this time, a large number of people rushed in. Chapter 26:38. Suyu was not interested in the funerary objects. What he was interested in was the corpses inside. Surprisingly, none of the corpses were rotten. They were all perfectly preserved. Isn't it said that only the leaders can be buried here? Suyu looked at the tens of thousands of coffins in front of him, his heart full of doubts. How could the demon faction have so many leaders? If the ones buried in those coffins were not the leaders of the demon faction, then what were they? At that moment, Suyu noticed that the people from the Star Alliance Chamber of Commerce were exchanging glances with each other, communicating with their souls. After a while, they left a few people here, while another group of people walked to the center. Suyu used his gaze to look over, and he suddenly discovered that there was a golden coffin lying in the middle of it. He subconsciously took out a jade bottle. The pure demonic energy in the bottle was circulating wildly, as if it was about to rush out of the jade bottle. Suyu opened the bottle cap, and the pure demonic energy turned into a sharp arrow, shooting toward the golden coffin. The holy demon! Suyu's heart beat slightly. Step back, Suyu said slowly in a low voice. Yao Guang was about to go to the golden coffin in the center. Elder, did you find anything? Yao Guang and the other descendants of the rulers asked as they stepped back. Suyu nodded. Yanran, be ready to lead everyone to escape. Based on his contact with the holy demon, the power of the holy demon was beyond imagination. The road master was no match for it, unless the time master personally intervened. At the same time, Suyu's eyes searched quickly for the whereabouts of the Sinful Lady Palace. He searched according to the image in the Tai Haotian mirror. Something that caused his pupils to shrink violently appeared. On the cliff in the deepest part of the demon faction's ancient tomb, a magnificent hall hanging alone came into view. The hall was old and shabby, but it exuded an aura that was incompatible with the demon faction's ancient tomb. There was a sense of evil in that aura. It was the path of sin that the Sinful Lady had cultivated. The Sinful Lady Palace. Suyu clenched his fist. He had finally found it. After running for decades, he had finally found the Sinful Lady Palace and found the hope of resurrecting Yun Yazi. At that moment, the people from the Star Alliance Chamber of Commerce had arrived in front of the golden coffin. They were working together to open the lid of the coffin. Those who arrived later rushed over because they had also discovered the existence of the golden coffin. Creak, with a crisp sound, a crack finally appeared on the golden coffin cover under the joint efforts of several experts from the Star Alliance Chamber of Commerce. Suyu's heart thumped wildly, and he had a bad feeling about this. Yao Guang took out her tortoise shell and performed a divination on the spot. In the end, it was a very inauspicious hexagram. Let's leave this place first, Yao Guang said decisively. Suyu took a look at the Sinful Lady Palace and suppressed the reluctance in his heart. He then said, retreat. The disbelief in his heart grew stronger and stronger. This kind of uneasiness often indicated a great threat of life and death. Yanran nodded. She immediately unleashed her spatial domain and carried them away through the cave. When he returned to the ground, Suyu's uneasy feeling receded like a tide. More and more people were still rushing down the cave. Let's see what's going on inside. Yanran took out a magic treasure and tossed it into the air. An image was projected into the air. It turned out that before she left, Yanran had placed a talisman in it. The runes could transmit the situation in the fiend sect's ancient tomb to the Dharma treasure before him. In the projection, the people from the Star Alliance Chamber of Commerce finally opened a finger-sized crack on the golden coffin. Bang! Before they could see clearly what was in the golden coffin, the lid of the coffin suddenly shot up into the sky and was slapped away by a tremendous force. Then, a ferocious ghostly claw swept across the image. The member of the Star Alliance Chamber of Commerce, who was responsible for opening the lid of the coffin, was instantly turned into a cloud of blood mist. What was even more terrifying was that within the range that the talisman could see, all living creatures were turned into ashes by the ghostly claw. In the blink of an eye, tens of thousands of strong men were killed. Among them, there were even existences at the level of the Path Masters. None of the living creatures escaped. The blood-red ancient tomb of the Fiend sect immediately turned into a river of blood and became a living hell. Fortunately, the people who were further away were not affected at all. Yanran activated the talisman in the air and changed her perspective. She found that with the few remaining strong men from the Star Alliance Chamber of Commerce as the boundary, they and the strong men behind them were all safe and sound. However, the horrifying scene in front of them caused the people who were rushing in to retreat in fear. They wanted to leave. However, a large number of people were rushing in, and it was impossible for them to rush out through the cave. For a moment, the scene was extremely chaotic. I miscalculated. A bone-chilling sigh came from the golden coffin. Clatter! A ferocious ghostly claw stretched out from the golden coffin and grabbed the edge of the coffin. Then, a terrifying living creature whose body was rotting and surging with demonic aura slowly sat up from the golden coffin. It had a pair of dark green eyes that burned with green flames. Its head turned and looked at the panicking crowd. The Time Master actually sent a motley crew like you here. Is he really going to die soon? Creak, creak. The sound of bones rubbing against each other could be heard. The rotting body slowly stood up from the golden coffin. Traces of pitch-black liquid fell from its body and dripped onto the golden coffin, making a sizzling sound. At this moment, the living creatures in the ancient tomb of the Fiend sect were even more terrified. Some of them even screamed in fear. Holy Demon, our Alliance Master is interested in you. Come back with us. A rhythmic and metallic voice slowly floated over. It was the core member of the Star Alliance Chamber of Commerce. He was short and looked like a child, but his face was extremely old. The holy demon lifted its foot and walked out of the golden coffin. The 8 chains binding his body immediately let out creaking sound. The Star Alliance Chamber of Commerce. What an ancient name! The holy demon murmured. If the Alliance Master of the Star Alliance Chamber of Commerce came personally, I might have to be wary. You can shut up now. As soon as it said this, thousands of thunderbolts rumbled and fell. Thousands of people were burned to ashes on the spot. Since the Time Master is treating you as a greeting gift, I shall accept it. The holy demon pulled the chains in its hand. The entire ancient tomb of the Fiend sect shook violently. Astonishing life waves came from the neatly placed coffins. Crack, crack. The coffins broke open one by one. The corpses inside all opened their eyes and revealed a fierce glint as they pounced toward the nearest living creatures. Tens of thousands of corpses were all resurrected. Corpse race. They are all corpse race. They were not corpses. They were clearly corpse race members who had fallen into a deep sleep. Moreover, after being personally nurtured by the holy demon, the cultivation of each corpse race member was incredibly powerful. Many strong men were caught off guard and were pounced on by the corpse race. Once bitten, they were immediately transformed into corpse race members. Su Yu's pupils shrank as he watched. He had come into contact with many corpse race members, but he had never seen such a rapid transformation. Moreover, there were a few corpse race members whose cultivation was terrifyingly high. Suddenly, Suyu stared at a corpse race member, his expression stiff. Chapter 2639. It was a female corpse clan member. She was dressed in a graceful and luxurious brocade robe, and her hair fell like a waterfall on the back of her shoulders. Her fair complexion exuded a peerless beauty. She was in the blood-red sky, but she was like a pearl, reflecting a brilliance that was hard to ignore. All the corpse clan members were greedily tearing at the living creatures. Only she was standing in the distance. She was like the female empress, overlooking the surroundings and watching her soldiers fight. The pearl female corpse. Suyu uttered the name that he hadn't heard for a long time, one word at a time. How could he forget Pearl? The Pearl Corpse King who was deeply in love with him when he first entered the Great Beginning Realm? Later, he mistakenly thought that he was killed by the Sinful Lady Palace. He led his own corpse clan members to find the Sinful Lady Palace for revenge. 100 years passed. Time passed quickly. Time had worn away memories, diluted dreams, and obliterated the original intentions. The only thing that could not be worn away, diluted, and obliterated was the Pearl Corpse King's desire for revenge. He thought that the Pearl Corpse King had stopped in a certain civilization and stopped moving forward. However, she never stopped. From that small half-star civilization, she crossed millions of stars, crossed the barriers of heaven and earth, and arrived in front of the Sinful Lady Palace. At this moment, Suyu's heart trembled. A surge of deep warmth surged in his heart, causing him to be moved in a way that he hadn't felt in a long time. 100 years have passed, and the world has changed. Only you are the same as before. Suyu stared at the beautiful figure, and a trace of tears slowly overflowed from his eyes. Pearl, how could I bear your undying love for 100 years? For revenge, you would rather die than destroy it? At this moment, the scene suddenly changed. The old child finally made a move. Light shone behind him, and a Buddha statue appeared faintly behind him. Great Master Shiming. The Buddha statue stretched out its palm and pressed down gently. Many of the corpse clan members immediately retreated into the shadows in fear. The light was like a nemesis to many evil spirits. Only the holy demon looked calm. No matter how many rays of light hit him, he did not move. Petty tricks. The holy demon flicked his finger. The old child let out a muffled groan. The giant Buddha behind him shed 2 lines of tears and quickly dimmed. Saint. Several experts from the Star Alliance Chamber of Commerce immediately supported the old child, and said in panic. A sage was a peak existence at the late stage of the Tao Lord realm. He searched the time domain several times, but he could not find many enemies that he could fight. But who would have thought that in front of the holy demon, the enemy would not be able to defeat him with just a flick of his finger? All of you, step down. The holy devil calendar has been cultivating for a long time, and he has absorbed the legacy of the ancient god of the netherworld. He has already reached the heavenly Tao Lord realm. The old child's face was as pale as paper. With a tap of his foot, a spatial ripple rippled out and enveloped all of them. The saint demon said indifferently, "You want to leave after disturbing this old man?" Chi, the chains on his body suddenly swept across. Several members of the Star Alliance Chamber of Commerce immediately screamed and turned into a mist of blood. Only the old child forcefully held onto the chain with both hands. Shock was written all over his face. Saint Demon, the legacy of the ancient god of the Nine Nether was left for his successor. How can you be worthy of the trust of the ancient god of the Nine Nether by stealing from him? As it turned out, when ancient god Nine Nether died, he had used his transcendent divine arts to seal or protect his 4 most trusted protectors. All of them had the legacy left behind by the ancient god of the Nine Nether. Moreover, he had given them a mission. That was to leave the legacy for his successor in the future. When the 4 legacy gathered on his successor, a new ancient god of the Nine Nether would be born. The other 3 protectors were still missing. Only the Saint Demon was still there. However, he did not listen to the orders of the ancient god of the Nine Nether and monopolized the legacy that belonged to the successor of the ancient god of the Nine Nether. Only then could he break through the shackles of his realm and become the heavenly Tao Lord. The sky has changed and the earth has changed. This is no longer the era of the ancient gods. No matter how pedantically I obey the orders of the ancient god, I will sooner or later disappear from this world with the legacy. The Saint Demon spoke with conviction. He glanced at the old child. I see that your strength is passable. Come under my command. Once I unify the time domain, you will be rewarded for your service. The child smiled and shook his head. Saint Demon, you overestimate yourself and underestimate the ruler. He is everywhere, everywhere. After saying this, the old child slowly closed his eyes. At the same time, rays of light erupted from his body, illuminating his entire body. Then, he stood there motionlessly. The Saint Demon withdrew his chains and said calmly, You would rather die than be under my command? The Star Alliance Chamber of Commerce is not full of motley crew. Without the resistance of the experts of the Star Alliance Chamber of Commerce, the corpse race was no longer hindered. The experts who entered the ancient tomb of the demon sect were all transformed into corpse race members. Not a single one escaped. Only those experts who had not entered the cave were lucky enough to escape. The ancient tomb of the demon sect became quiet again. The Saint Demon said calmly, Let's go. Since we have been exposed, we can't stay here any longer. The Pearl Corpse King turned around and looked at the sinful lady palace with empty eyes. It's just an empty shell. Why do you care? The Saint Demon said. He waved his hand, and an astonishing demonic fog surged out from the ground of the ancient tomb of the demon sect and enveloped all the corpse race members, including the Saint Demon himself. Then, he disappeared without a trace. Yanran and the others were shocked. It's gone. How can it be? Yao Guang said, If I were the Saint Demon, I would also leave a way to escape. Otherwise, if I were discovered one day, I would be like a turtle in a jar. Look at the order in which the coffins were placed. Yanran discovered something. Looking down from above, she discovered something. It was a formation. It turned out that the Saint Demon had been prepared and had hidden the formation under the coffins. It could be transported away at any time through the formation. Swoosh! While they were talking, Suyu had already ventured underground again. He came to the place where the Pearl Corpse King had stood, feeling lost. Why did the Pearl Corpse King become the subordinate of the Saint Demon? Was it forced, or did it voluntarily? Where was she going now? Staring at the empty world, Suyu kept asking himself. The only thing he was sure of was that they would meet again soon. The Saint Demon was ambitious and would never be content in one place. He would definitely find the right time to come out again and occupy the time domain. That might be the day he would truly meet the Pearl Corpse King. Look, there seems to be a great hall over there. Yanran and the others came down one after another, searching for the remaining resources in the coffins while searching the surroundings. The sinful lady palace was naturally discovered. Suyu returned to his senses and said, Wait a moment. His figure was like a rainbow as he crossed the cliff and arrived in front of the sinful lady palace. A crooked hall with the words Danfeng Palace came into view. Is this hall only a part of the sinful lady palace? Suyu's eyes darkened. He stepped inside. The fake mountain was ruined, the small spring dried up, and the fairy plants decayed. There was nothing inside. In the deepest part, in a lotus pond, it had long since dried up. Numerous withered lotus flowers were left with only the outlines of dust. Suyu felt a tightness in his chest and clenched his fists tightly. He had found the sinful lady palace. He had gone through countless hardships and twists and turns, but what he found was only an empty shell. Just as he had worried before, the sinful lady had been missing for many years. Were her former subordinates still loyal to her? Could the sinful lotus be preserved? Now it seemed that everything would develop in the worst-case scenario. In fact, even if the members of the Sinful Lady Palace did not betray her, the Sinful Lotus could not possibly still be there. This palace was deep in the ancient tomb of the demonic faction, right under the nose of the Saint Demon. If there really was a divine object of heaven and earth that the Sinful Lady had nurtured for an era, would the Saint Demon turn a blind eye? The answer was no. Suyu stood in front of the lotus pond, feeling extremely depressed. "Master, what should I do?" Suyu shouted. He had really tried his best. Drip. Suddenly, Suyu felt a burning sensation in his chest. He touched it with his hand and found the Sinful Lady's soul crystal nucleus. It was emitting a scorching light that was extremely dazzling. This. Suyu was confused. The soul crystal nucleus had been with him for decades and had not shown any changes. Why did it suddenly react now? He glanced at the lotus pond. Suyu's heart skipped a beat. With a wave of his sleeves, the entire lotus pond was cleaned up. At the bottom of the lotus pond, there was a depression the size of a thumb. It was the soul crystal nucleus. Could it be? Suyu was a little excited as he placed the soul crystal nucleus into the depression. Walala, what followed was the sound of water. Looking sideways, from the bottom of the lotus pond, an unknown clear spiritual water was gushing out, quickly covering the bottom of the pond. Suyu jumped out immediately. Under his incredulous gaze, lotuses of various colors bloomed in the spiritual water at a speed visible to the naked eye. Some were pink, some were white, and some were light yellow. However, one of the lotuses was the most peculiar. Its entire body was black. It was like an elegant swan, standing among the lotuses and dancing. Shreds of evil intent were slowly released from the lotus. Sinful Lotus. Suyu was indescribably excited. As expected, the Sinful Lotus had always existed in the Sinful Lady Palace, but it could only appear when the soul crystal nucleus was present. Suyu's disappointed heart was once again filled with joy. With a wave of his palm, he took out the soul crystal nucleus and looked quietly at the slowly unfolding Sinful Lotus. The Sinful Lotus unfolded, revealing a pitch-black pistol. The pistol was swallowing shreds of a special aura. That aura was extremely corrosive. Suyu's eyelids twitched, sensing danger. The Sinful Lady once said that there was a shred of Yunyazi's soul in her soul crystal nucleus. However, her soul crystal nucleus is too hard. Nothing in this world can break it. Only the Sinful Lotus can melt it. Once it's melted, I can take out a shred of Yunyazi's soul. With Suyu's current soul attainments, it would be easy to revive Yunyazi with the help of this shred of soul. Suyu could not contain his excitement. With a flick of his finger, he shot the soul crystal nucleus into the Sinful Lotus. As expected, the hard soul crystal nucleus began to melt, turning into crystal-clear liquid droplet. The soul that had been sealed within finally broke free and drifted into nothingness. Suyu's eyes were sharp, and he caught hold of it before it dissipated. He then stuffed it into his own soul and nourished it with his own soul energy. Feeling the familiar soul that he had not seen for a long time, Suyu could finally put down the huge rock that had been hanging in his heart for countless years. "Master, we meet again." Suyu smiled knowingly. Looking at the soul crystal nucleus that was left with only liquid, Suyu's eyes were filled with a complicated look. A man's words are kind when he is about to die. You were thinking of me before you died, so consider this as atonement for your sins. Suyu said, I forgive you. After saying this, he turned around and left without looking back. What he did not know was that, not long after he left, the soul crystal nucleus that had turned into liquid began to condense again. Chapter 2640. In the blink of an eye, it condensed into a thumb-sized transparent person. She clumsily picked up the pistol of the Sin Lotus and started to chew on it. With every bite, his body grew bigger. Half a cup of tea later, she swallowed the last bit of the pistol of the Sin Lotus. Her body had already returned to the size of a normal human. The curvaceous body of a woman appeared. Furthermore, the color of his skin began to appear on his originally translucent body. Not long after, a beautiful body with skin as white as snow and as exquisite as suet jade appeared in a natural posture. His facial features gradually became clearer. Her eyes were like gems, her eyebrows were thin like willow leaves, and her cheeks were flawless. The beauty she emitted was enough to cause the world to lose its color and all the flowers to lose their luster. There was no one else in the world who could match her appearance. If Suyu was still here, he would surely be able to recognize it. It was Xia Jingyu's face. Exactly the same face. The peerless beauty gently crooked her finger, and the lotus leaf of the Sin Lotus turned into a mass of black air and attached itself to her side, turning into a brand new black dress. The petals of the nefarious lotus transformed into a pitch-black lotus imprint that was branded between his brows. In the blink of an eye, the crystal core transformed into the black-clothed Xia Jingyu. She gently grasped the stem of the lotus flower with her palm. The pole immediately burst into black flames and burned on its own. But after the fire, what was left was a long sword that was as black as ink. Shockingly, that sword was the Sin Sword. Finally, the black-clothed Xia Jingyu stepped on the lotus pond with the tip of her foot. The lotus pond split open, revealing a pitch-black lotus root. She picked up the lotus root, bit by bit, and ate it. With every mouthful, her cultivation base would rise by a large realm. When she finished eating the lotus, her cultivation actually surpassed the Tao Master and reached the level of the Heaven Tao Master. They were even slightly more powerful than the holy demon, who, the black-clothed Xia Jingyu, exhaled a mouthful of turbid air. A look of relief appeared on his face. The origin world that I spent most of my life and effort to create in the past was finally not wasted. The black-robed Xia Jingyu, or more accurately speaking, she was a sinful woman. Long before he chased after Yun Yazi, was schemed against by Emperor Xiaoyao, and was imprisoned in the Taodai cage. She had left a backup plan. He cut off half of his body and sealed it in the true evil lotus world. If there came a day when the other half of his body was destroyed, as long as his soul could return to the true evil lotus world, he would be able to escape. Then he could wake up the other half that was sleeping. The sinful girl sat at the edge of the lotus pond. He held the sword in one hand and pressed it against the ground. His other hand rested on his knee. He slowly closed his eyes. A gust of wind blew over, blowing a layer of black mist from his body. His eyes slowly opened. His eyes were filled with hatred. So, I was Miraflower, Heavenly Prince's vessel, from the very beginning. Sinful girl sighed as she received the information from the other half of her body. She was obsessed with martial arts. But in the end, from the moment she was born, she was destined to be someone else's bride. Yun Yazi. She tightly gripped the hilt of her sword, her eyes filled with extreme guilt. You were killed by me and your soul was nearly destroyed. But even in death, you hid the truth from me. You didn't want to tell me that I was a vessel. A sparkling teardrop slid down her face. It was regret and self-blame. If she could turn back time, she would definitely want to be that young girl who cultivated martial arts wholeheartedly under Yun Yazi's guidance. Unfortunately, nothing would change. I will pay you back what I owe you, but not now. The sinful girl slowly stood up. Her eyes shone with a divine light that looked down on the world. Xiaoyao, son of heaven, you plotted against me and Yun Yazi. I will make you pay with your blood. She would pay Yun Yazi's debt. But the premise was that she would pay Xiaoyao, son of heaven, back. The world, my sinful girl, is back. With a long roar, the ancient tomb of the demon sect shook. On the ground, the 9 moons that formed a line seemed to be greatly disturbed, and their trajectories were extremely chaotic. The moons even collided with each other. In the time domain, countless sentient beings fled in a panic, as if some extremely terrifying being had descended upon them. In the time wilderness, on a worn-out hourglass. An old man closed his eyes and sat powerlessly on the throne that was formed by time. Suddenly, the old man opened his eyes. A trace of horror flashed in his eyes. Sinful girl? The old man stood up, trembling. With a wave of his hand, a vast river of time appeared in front of him. In the river of time, many reflections of time flashed past. The scene of the sinful girl being suppressed in the Tao Tai. The scene of the sinful girl being killed by Su Yu. All of these scenes were extremely real. How is she still alive? The old man asked the heavens, his eyes filled with shock. Could it be that the sinful girl has cultivated to the real world and become an immortal being? Among the almighty beings, the one who mastered the real world could live forever. Otherwise, even if he was the master of time and controlled the time of the world, he would still die and perish. No wonder the sinful girl was easily suppressed in the Tao Tai's cage. It turns out that it was only half of her body that was suppressed. The old man's body trembled. A trace of fear filled the depths of his eyes. As expected of the number one person under the emperor, the old man exclaimed. The world is really going to be in chaos. The end of the era was imminent, but the sinful girl had reappeared in the world. Somewhere, the holy demon led the Pearl Corpse King and others to hide in the dark. Suddenly, the holy demon looked in the direction of the ancient tomb of the demon sect, his eyes sharp. Sinful girl? She's not dead? The Pearl Corpse King beside him, her calm face suddenly gave off a strong murderous aura. Sinful girl? She's not dead? Where is she? The Pearl Corpse King roared as if enraged. The many corpses behind him roared and roared at the same time. The holy demon pressed his hand down. Don't act rashly. The terror of the sinful girl is beyond your imagination. Rashly seeking revenge will only add to your ashes. The Pearl Corpse King's eyes flashed with resistance. But for some reason, the words of the holy demon were absolute orders to her, making the Pearl Corpse King unable to struggle free. Not only the sacred city. In the three great realms of the time domain, many strong men sensed the appearance of a sinful aura. Even the other dominion domains far away could sense its existence. The entire 8-star civilization was in an inexplicable shock because of the rebirth of the sinful girl. Su Yu, who had just left the ground, suddenly felt his heart palpitate. It was as if something underground had awakened. What's going on? Yao Guang asked in surprise. Yanran was equally puzzled. Should we go back and take a look? Lulua suggested. Su Yu thought for a moment, his eyes flashing slightly. Let's go. He was worried. Could it be that he had melted the soul crystal nucleus, causing some kind of drastic change? However, just as they were about to set off, the entire ground suddenly caved in. Su Yu and the others immediately soared into the air. Lowering his head to take a look, his expression changed. The whole ground had completely collapsed. The ancient tomb of the demon sect was completely submerged. This. Yao Guang was bewildered. Su Yu sensed an unusual aura from the ruins. Chapter 2641. He was right. He had indeed sensed the aura of the sinful girl. But wasn't she already dead? Or was there another secret in the soul crystal core? Su Yu laughed self-mockingly as he recalled the sinful woman's remorseful request before her death. In the end, I still underestimated the sinful woman. In a sense, he had been tricked by the sinful woman. However, even though he knew that the sinful woman might come back to life, Su Yu would still go back on his word and melt the soul crystal nucleus. As long as he could revive Yun Yazi, everything else wouldn't be a problem. Everyone returned to the upper palace first. The 7 hegemon descendants had found quite a few treasures in the coffins, and they needed time to digest them. Su Yu also had an extremely important matter to attend to. In a flash, he arrived at the secret chamber. Looking at the strand of soul in his palm, his heart was filled with excitement. Master, I've kept you waiting for a long time. A wisp of life force started gathering in Su Yu's palm. Prepare to activate resurrection. However, at this moment a voice rang out. I suggest that you wait a little longer. It was the Soul Dominator who spoke. Suyu's hand paused, and he asked, why? The Soul Dominator said, do you think you can restore his soul to its peak with your attainments in the domain of life? This question was very profound. Suyu's heart jumped. After muttering to himself for a long time, he slowly shook his head. I can only restore it to the moment of his death. When he died, his soul was only at the level of an emperor of heaven and earth. Not even Master Xian Dao had reached that level. You only have one chance to resurrect him. The Soul Dominator asked, do you want to revive Yun Yazi when he's an emperor of heaven and earth, or a Yun Yazi in his prime? Suyu hesitated. Of course, he hoped that the former could see him as soon as possible to make up for the guilt in his heart. However, reason told him that he should choose the latter. If he were to be resurrected to the moment before his death, it would take a long time for his soul to recover to its peak. He believed that this was not what Yun Yazi wanted to see. What are the conditions for me to return to my peak? Suyu asked. Become the Life Dominator, or receive the Life Dominator's help, or attain the Origin Dominator's life domain yourself, the Soul Dominator said faintly. Suyu clenched his teeth. After some thought, he retracted the thread of Yun Yazi's soul. He had already waited for so long. So what if he waited a little longer? As long as he could restore Yun Yazi to his peak. The Soul Dominator nodded in satisfaction. Your choice is wise. After a pause, the Soul Dominator said, Shengqing, leave as soon as possible. I sensed the Time Dominator just now. Suyu was shocked. Even when ancient God Nine Nether's successor appeared, the Time God did not appear. But now, he showed himself? If he stayed any longer in the sacred city, he would really be in unpredictable danger. Thank you for reminding me, Suyu said. 3 days later, the descendants of the masters of the Upper Palace invited Suyu to a banquet. They had gained a lot from this trip to the demonic sect's ancient tomb, so they were in a good mood. Sirs, I think I should bid farewell to all of you, Suyu said as he cupped his fists at them. To tell the truth, he had a pretty good impression of the descendants of the hegemons. Yao Guang and the others sighed. Suyu had said that he would leave after the ancient tomb of the demon faction. It was the end of the banquet. Lulua said reluctantly, Thank you for your guidance these days. Lulua can't thank you enough. Lulua had learned a lot about the time domain from Suyu. Yanran also said, You saved my life. Yanran will never forget it. Senior, where are you going next? The other descendants of the hegemons were fine, but Yanran was most concerned about Suyu's whereabouts. She hoped to use Suyu's strength to help Xiaohao ascend to the position of the hegemons. Suyu thought for a while and said, Travel the world. He did not want to expose that he was assisting the Star Rain Empress. I see. Yanran was regretful, but she did not give up. She said, Senior, you once said that you need a treasure that can accelerate time by 10,000 times. I will ask Xiaohao. Please leave your communication method. If there is any progress, Yanran will inform you immediately. All right. Suyu immediately gave Yanran a communication magical treasure. If there is a chance, we will meet again. Suyu said goodbye in public. He had put Qin Xiener and the others into a special space storage. It would not be a problem to take them out of the sacred city without being discovered. However, Suyu did not leave the sacred city after leaving the upper palace. He came to a corner. There was a very secret abandoned house there. Who is it? The accompanying tunnel master shouted. It's me. It was only because he could see Suyu that he opened the seal on the roof of the house and let Suyu in. As soon as he entered, Suyu found a group of people in the yard. They were from different races, and their faces were filled with pride. But they did have the right to be proud, because every one of them had reached the level of a tunnel master. One of them had even reached the peak of the early stage of the Tunnel Master and was almost at the middle stage of the Earth Path Master. They only glanced at Suyu's entrance and paid him no mind. Everyone, this is the Lord Su that I mentioned. He is also the person in charge of recruiting you," the Tunnel Master introduced. The Tunnel Master with the highest cultivation was a middle-aged man from the Swan clan. He had an elegant and proud temperament. "You are recruiting us?" The other party looked Suyu up and down with a critical eye and shook his head slightly. "You are a human and a nirvana completion martial artist at that." As he spoke, he strode out and said without turning his head, "Wait until you are sincere. Otherwise, don't waste my time." The rest of the people frowned. "Are you kidding me? A mere human can recruit so many of us tunnel masters?" "Sigh, I thought some big shot was recruiting and needed our services. It turns out not bad." Before Suyu went into seclusion, he gave the tunnel masters a task. Recruit strong tunnel masters as much as possible. There were too few tunnel masters under the rule of the Star Rain Empress. The only ones willing to listen to her orders were the 10 guards under her command. But she had already lost 4 of them. There were not many left around her. She needed a group of powerful and obedient tunnel masters. "It's just some time crystals. I can still afford it," Suyu said calmly. The man from the Swan clan stopped and turned his head. "Human, you need 1 billion time crystals a year to recruit me. Are you sure you can afford it?" Suyu did not say a word and took out a space storage device. He threw it into the air, and an infinite number of time crystals fell from it. There were 10 billion of them. The tunnel masters who were about to leave stopped in their tracks, their pupils constricting. 10 years. "If you come with me, you can take it now," Suyu said lightly. The middle-aged man from the Swan clan was in disbelief. But if he went back now, he would lose face. Cough. "I am a man with aspirations, not just money," the middle-aged man from the Swan clan said proudly. Chapter 2642. Despite saying this, the remaining light continued to drift towards the 10 billion time crystals piled up in the courtyard. "What about 20 billion? Suyu took out another space storage device and poured out another 10 billion from it. The middle-aged man from the Swan clan could not help but feel his eyelids twitch. His breathing quickened. 20 billion. What did that mean? In his entire life of cultivation, he did not have 20 billion time crystals. He secretly swallowed his saliva, but his words were exceptionally stubborn. Suyu asked calmly, "Is 30 billion enough?" Hearing this, the hearts of the members of the Swan clan beat wildly. 300? Even if he died, he might not be able to earn so many time crystals. Enough. The middle-aged man from the Swan clan returned with a smile on his face. "Lord Su, I hope we can cooperate happily." Suyu nodded expressionlessly and did not even look at him. His gaze turned towards the second Earth Lord. "What about you? What kind of person are you?" "Lord Su, I'm a very casual person. Just give me whatever you want." "Oh, then I'll just give you 10 or 20 billion. What about you? What kind of person are you?" Not long after, there were so many time crystals in the courtyard that they could no longer fit in. The pressure caused the courtyard's barrier to creak. It was as if it could not bear the weight and was about to be crushed. Suyu stood in front of the group of underground masters and said with a smile, "I already know what kind of people you are. I believe that you should also know what kind of person I am, right?" The middle-aged man from the Swan clan patted his chest and said, "Lord Su is truly heroic. I, Fei Yunxing, admire you." Yes, Lord Su's generosity is rarely seen in this world. Even though they were pathmasters, and their cultivations were much higher than Suyu's. However, before money, he shamefully lowered his head and flattered a junior. Little did they know that the time crystal was extremely cheap and worthless to Suyu. He only needed to casually make a grabbing motion to condense the time that filled the sky into a time crystal. There was no lack of time crystals in this world. Not to mention tens of billions, even a few trillion was just a matter of time. The time crystal was like air to Suyu, who was already able to create it. It was no longer valuable. Just like that, Su Yu deceived a group of strong men and rushed back to the southern part of the dream-broken realm. It had been several years since they last met. The southern part of the broken dream realm was still the same. When he returned, Empress Star Rain was in the Empress Palace, working hard on her time domain. With Su Yu's help, Empress Star Rain's time domain had made great progress. Now that he had reached the elementary domain, he could easily grasp simple abilities such as acceleration, rewind, and freeze. "Brother, you are back." When the Star Rain Empress heard that Su Yu had returned, she rushed 10,000 miles away to welcome him. From afar, she threw herself into his arms. "I was so worried about you." Empress Star Rain deeply enjoyed the embrace that she had not felt for a long time. Ever since she had met Su Yu, everything had taken a turn for the better. Unknowingly, she had started to rely on Su Yu. Su Yu had been away for a few years, and he couldn't help but worry about his gains and losses. The mission has been completed." Su Yu took out a ring and stuffed it into his hand. This was the Tian Luo ring, and it contained the Heaven Dao Master's terrifying attack. It was the most powerful of all sovereign treasures. "Ah, this is the Tian Luo ring?" Queen Star Rain rubbed her eyes, thinking that she was dreaming. The Heaven Luo ring was ranked number 2 and required at least 600 contribution points. How did Su Yu exchange for it with 500 contribution points? "This time we finally have a 50% chance of winning," Su Yu said. At present, it seemed that Xiaohao was the biggest threat. The golden-eyed Lang Jun and his daughter had taken away the number 1 sovereign treasure, and it must have been handed over to Xiaohao. With this treasure, Xiaohao would be invincible. However, Su Yu had the other half of the treasures, and most of them were of high quality. They might be able to put up a fight. "Did anything happen while I was away?" Su Yu asked. Empress Star Rain shook her head. It was strangely peaceful. Perhaps the holy city's taking of the sovereign treasure and the appearance of the holy demon had attracted the attention of Waning Moon and Xiaohao. Therefore, it had been very peaceful. However, the mindful emperor might not be so peaceful. Empress Star Rain raised her slender eyebrows. Su Yu asked, "Why do you say that?" "A few months ago, the mindful emperor contacted me. The people of the Waning Moon Empress are restless at the border of Dongming City. Perhaps they are planning something." Speaking of the Waning Moon Empress, Su Yu naturally recalled the day when he had passed through Shiming City, when he had been deceived by the people of the Waning Moon Empress, who had disguised themselves as the emissaries of the holy city. "Brother, I am going to send 2 tunnel masters over to investigate," Empress Star Rain said helplessly. She had too few tunnel masters that she could use. She only had 4 guards left, which could not be any lower. "I will go myself," Su Yu said. Since he had formed an alliance with Dongming City, he should act like one. The contest of the sovereigns would begin in 10 years. There were some details about the cooperation that he should discuss with the mindful emperor. "I have just returned. I can't let you continue to work hard," Empress Star Rain said, her heart aching for him. Su Yu shook his head. "If you care about me, take care of my family for me." With a shake of his sleeves, Su Yu summoned Qin Xiener and the others and introduced them to him. Empress Star Rain blinked. Su Yu had a wife, and even his daughter was so old. She could not accept it for a moment, and it took her a while to convince herself. "All right, brother, go in peace. Unless the Empress Great Hall is not here, no one can harm them," Empress Star Rain said to herself. Even if she had to reduce her own defensive power, she had to send 1 or 2 tunnel masters to protect Su Yu's family. "Right," Su Yu said. "I will leave a few to look after the house. Star Rain, make arrangements for them so that they can quickly familiarize themselves with their new post." "Look after the house? Brother will find some new strong men from outside?" But with Su Yu's cultivation and financial resources, what kind of strong men can he find? At most Nirvana Void Realm? Wow. Su Yu waved his hand and 50 people appeared in front of him. They were all tunnel masters. They looked around curiously. Empress Star Rain was stunned. When she saw their faces clearly, she recognized some of them. When she saw the middle-aged man from the Swan clan, she screamed, "Ah! It's the secular swordsman, Fei Yunxing." She could not believe that she had seen Fei Yunxing. He was a famous strong man in the Holy City, whose cultivation was close to the middle stage of the Tunnel Master. In the entire time domain, there were not many opponents who could fight him. Su Yu had actually invited him here? After a moment of surprise, Empress Star Rain immediately became worried. She pulled Su Yu aside and said with a bitter smile, "Brother, haven't you gone too far?" "Why?" Empress Star Rain pointed at herself. "How can I afford to support so many tunnel masters? Especially Fei Yunxing, I can't afford to hire him at all. If I don't pay them enough and anger them, it will backfire." Her 10 tunnel master guards were all bestowed to her by the Time Master herself. With Nanming City's limited financial resources, it was impossible to support so many tunnel masters. Chapter 2643. Su Yu could not help but laugh. The fact that he had brought back so many experts did not make Empress Star Rain happy at all. Instead, she was deeply worried. "Haha, you don't need to worry." Su Yu thought for a moment, then pulled the Star Rain Empress to a corner. He handed him an extra-large spatial storage device. "What? Time crystal. How much?" "I don't remember. Count them yourself." Empress Star Rain probed it with her consciousness, and all she saw were countless time crystals. There were so many of them that she couldn't even count them all. A rough estimate was that there were no less than 1,000,000,000,000 time crystals. Did you rob the sovereign's treasury?" Empress Star Rain's eyes went wide. Trillions of time crystals, what kind of concept was that? In the entire time domain, the number of time crystals circulating in a year didn't even reach this number. "Hee, you can say that." Su Yu laughed. To be precise, he didn't rob the treasury of the time ruler. Instead, he became the creator of the time crystal. How many time crystals he wanted depended on his mood. "You must use this money where you need it." Su Yu's eyes flickered. Empress Star Rain was not stupid, and she immediately understood. A smile appeared on her face. "I feel that I really do have a chance of becoming the ruler of time. With so much money, he could totally poach over the Tunnel Lord powerhouses of North Bright City and West Bright City. Everyone in the world came for benefit. Weren't those experts willing to submit to the Waning Moon Empress and Xiaohao because they had a huge amount of resources? As long as he could give them the same amount, no, double or even more, would they still be loyal? "Thank you, Big Brother." Queen Star Rain was so excited that she could hardly contain herself. The power of this sum of money was much more powerful than the Tian Luo Ring. The Heaven Luo Ring could only unleash one attack from the Heaven Tao Lord, which was enough to defeat a descendant of the Time Ruler. However, this amount of wealth was more than enough to destroy the descendants of the Time Sovereign. "Go ahead," Su Yu said. He could only help them this much. Empress Star Rain clenched her fists and said, "Give me 10 years, and I'm confident that I'll empty Empress Waning Moon and Great Emperor Xiaohao." That had better be the case. The Waning Moon Empress might still have a chance, but Xiaohao. Su Yu felt that this person was not easy to deal with. He had fought with Xiaohao before, and the domain that Xiaohao had displayed in the end had reached the advanced level. Although he was limited by his bloodline power, he didn't use it for a long time. However, his hidden strength had unintentionally revealed the tip of the iceberg. "Take good care of my wife and child." "I will take my leave first," Su Yu said. He only took Fei Yunxing with him and rushed to Dongming City without stopping. Half a year later, Su Yu and Fei Yunxing arrived at Dongming City's time channel. Today, all the time passages were under martial law, and no one was allowed to enter. There were also a large number of guards stationed nearby. A pretty girl with a long face was waiting with her arms crossed. "What are you waiting for?" This woman was none other than the woman with the special godly eyes, Zi Jun. Before Su Yu and the others had set off, Dongming City had received news that the Star Rain Empress had sent Su Yu there to discuss the details of the alliance. The mindful emperor sent his most trusted subordinate, Zi Jun, to receive him. As he spoke, the passage of time shook, and two figures wearing long robes and bamboo hats appeared. One of them took off his bamboo hat and revealed his face. It was Su Yu. Looking at Zi Jun in front of him, Su Yu smiled indifferently. "Long time no see, great emperor. How are you?" Zi Jun stared at Su Yu, her heart indescribably complicated. There was a bit of awe and a bit of rejection. Awe because she had seen with her own eyes how Su Yu had captured a terrifyingly powerful demon faction elder alive. His endless means and incredible plans made her respect him from the bottom of her heart. Rejection because she still felt that Nanming City wasn't qualified to cooperate with Dongming City. Recently, Nanming City had sent several emissaries to Dongming City to discuss the alliance in 10 years' time. However, they were all rejected by the mindful emperor because he felt that the best partner was Nanming City. This made Zi Jun very upset. No matter how she looked at it, cooperating with Nanming City was a wise move. "Why don't you see for yourself?" Zi Jun snorted. She glanced sideways at the tall man in the bamboo hat beside Su Yu and asked suspiciously, "Who is this?" The man didn't move and didn't answer. Su Yu smiled and said, "A guard. His cultivation base shouldn't be low, right? He should at least be a Nirvana Void Master or even a Path Master," Zi Jun thought. However, the Path Masters in Empress Star Rain's territory were nothing to Zi Jun. The only ones that Empress Star Rain could command were the few Path Master guards beside her. Zi Jun didn't dare to compliment their abilities. After pondering for a moment, Zi Jun said, "Su Yu, don't blame me for not reminding you. In Dongming City, there are many who oppose the alliance with Nanming City." "Really?" Su Yu wasn't surprised. There was nothing in Nanming City that could make anyone's eyes light up, except for the 500 contribution point. "Let them oppose it," Su Yu said indifferently. If not for their previous alliance relationship, he might not have wanted to form an alliance with Dongming City. What a good attitude! Ha! Zi Jun smiled and shook her head. "I hope you can still smile during the banquet." Zi Jun led the two into the mindful emperor's great hall. "The emperor is in a discussion with his advisors," Zi Jun said. "He is not free for the time being. Wait for his summons in the great hall." Zi Jun then turned and left. When there was no one around, Fei Yunxing asked in confusion, "Sir Su, with your status and abilities, why would you compromise and form an alliance with Dongming City?" Fei Yunxing was someone from the Holy City and had high standards. He had always been disdainful of the dream-interrupted world, which was located in a remote corner. Not to mention Dongming City, which was not considered outstanding. In his eyes, someone like Su Yu, who could casually take out an endless amount of time crystals, as well as a dominator's treasure like the Tianluo ring, could sweep through Dongming City alone. Why would there be a need to form an alliance? Furthermore, Dongming City actually opposed the alliance. Su Yu calmly said, "When Dongming City first proposed the alliance, we were still weak. Now we can't just kick them away just because we are strong." Fei Yunxing listened and secretly admired Su Yu. The world was a world of benefit. There were very few people who were principled. Su Yu was one of them. "Sir, I understand your intentions. If there is anything you need, please let me know." Fei Yunxing said, "In Dongming City, there is a former student of mine. He is still in the city. If it is inconvenient for us to do something, we can get him to do it." That would be great. But Su Yu would not be able to use him. Chapter 2644. Time passed bit by bit. The two servants arranged by Zi Jun were indifferent to the two of them. Su Yu and Fei Yunxing were exceptionally calm people, and they did not hold a grudge against each other. Until the sky darkened. When the 9 moons whose orbits were still in disarray appeared, a piercingly cold trident with a long trail of moonlight suddenly attacked. Assassination? Su Yu opened his eyes, slightly surprised. But then he slowly shook his head. It did not look like an assassination. Because this attack was too brazen, too aggressive. It is a provocation and a warning, Su Yu calmly said. Fei Yunqing raised his eyebrows and laughed angrily. What a bunch of ignorant fools. You are here to give them benefits, but they treat you as their enemy. As he spoke, he took a step forward and held the trident with one hand. The trident carried the power of a pathmaster, but in Fei Yunqing's hands, it was easily suppressed. Go back! Fei Yunqing flipped his hand and the trident flew backward. The force of the retreat was several times stronger than the force of the attack. They could faintly hear the angry roars of a group of people, followed by the sound of an explosion. They must have been unable to withstand the trident, causing it to hit the ground and create a huge crater. After that, they did not provoke them again. Fei Yunqing clapped his hands and said coldly, "A bunch of ignorant fools." After the violent explosion, Jun was alerted. She hurried over and asked, "Are you all right?" If Su Yu and the rest were injured, it would be a big deal. Su Yu calmly said, "Take care of your people. If this happens again, it will not end so easily." Jun was furious. Those fellows were a little too audacious. Not only did they oppose them, they even dared to attack them in the palace on the ground. If anything happened to Su Yu and the rest, it would trigger a war between the two areas. Beep beep. At that moment, the communication pendant on her body beeped. Jun's expression relaxed. "The great emperor is out, summoning you." Pausing, Jun looked in the direction of the explosion and said, "Please do not speak of what happened just now, or the great emperor will be put in a difficult position." Originally, Emperor Mindful's insistence on cooperating with Southern Clear City had caused a huge ruckus with some of his followers. If the Mindful Emperor found out that they had attacked Su Yu and his companions, he would probably be completely infuriated, and both sides would fall out. "Let's go." Su Yu couldn't be bothered with her. What logic? They were the ones who were attacked, yet they had to keep the secret for the provocateurs? Jun bit his lips and immediately led the way. Not long after, in the most distinguished hall of the Great Emperor Hall, the Tranquil Heart Emperor took the initiative to welcome them with a warm smile. "Mr. Su, I haven't seen you for many years, and you look even more elegant than before." Great Emperor Mingxin had a deep impression of Su Yu. In fact, the main reason why he was willing to form an alliance with the Nanming city was because of Su Yu. "The Great Emperor is," Su Yu said with a smile. Emperor Mindful smiled wryly and said helplessly, "AI. How could I still have any elegance?" He invited Su Yu to take a seat and ordered people to serve him the best tea. Then, he dismissed all the people in the hall. Only the few of them were left in the room. "Mr. Su, you should know that there is a problem with the ruler's treasures, right?" Great Emperor Mingxin's brows were filled with worry. Su Yu's eyes turned. "Of course I know. The ruler's treasures in the wilderness of time have been destroyed by the people from the netherworld and the heavenly awakening realm." Hearing this, Great Emperor Mingxin slapped his thigh and sighed. His words were filled with hatred. Those bastards. If I had the ability, I would definitely kill them all. Every descendant of the rulers worked hard for their entire lives to contribute. They hoped to use their contributions to exchange for the ruler's treasures they wanted. But what happened in the end? Great Emperor Mingxin hadn't even had the time to exchange for it when he heard the news. His life's work had been destroyed. How could he not be angry? How could he not hate them? But it's too late to say that now. Great Emperor Mingxin sighed deeply. Dongming City and the Nanming City have no more ruler's treasures to use. He subconsciously thought that the Nanming City also didn't have any ruler's treasures. "Great Emperor, don't worry. If we form an alliance, we still have a chance of winning." Su Yu spoke conservatively. In fact, even without Dongming City, they still had a chance of winning. Great Emperor Mingxin laughed bitterly. "Mr. Su, you might not understand what I mean. I mean, only Dongming City and Nanming City don't have ruler's treasures. Baiming City and Shiming City both have them. Suyu was surprised. Suyu could understand that Baiming City had treasures. After all, the golden-eyed Langjun and his daughter, as well as Yanran, had all brought rulers' treasures to great Emperor Xiaohao. But Shiming City had never sent anyone to exchange for rulers' treasures, right? Where did Shiming City's rulers' treasures come from? Without a doubt, it was from Baiming City. In other words, the two cities had secretly formed an alliance. So, Su Yu's expression was calm as usual. He could imagine that the most eye-catching thing about Nanming City was that they had 500 contribution points, which could be exchanged for a high-level ruler's treasure. But now there was no possibility of exchange. Would Dongming City still be willing to form an alliance with Nanming City? He quietly waited for Great Emperor Mingxin's reply. If he didn't want to form an alliance, Su Yu wouldn't lose anything. Great Emperor Mingxin calmly said, "So, my people are strongly against forming an alliance with Nanming City." Just as Su Yu was feeling disappointed, Great Emperor Mingxin's tone changed. "But I insist on forming an alliance with Nanming City." Su Yu raised his eyes, a hint of surprise in them. He calmly said, "Great Emperor, Nanming City no longer has the power to turn the tables. Why are you still so stubborn about us?" Great Emperor Mingxin laughed. "You indeed no longer have ruler's treasures, but I understand that Shiming City has no reason to form an alliance with us. With that kind of treasure, it was only a matter of time before Shiming City destroyed Dongming City. Why would they form an alliance with Dongming City?" The only answer was that the alliance was a trap. Clap, clap. Su Yu couldn't help but applaud. Under Great Emperor Mingxin's slightly surprised gaze, he smiled and said, "Congratulations, Great Emperor. You have made a very wise decision." Wise? Great Emperor Mingxin laughed bitterly in his heart. In the eyes of most people, this was the most foolish decision. It was hard to tell whether Su Yu's words were praise or sarcasm. "Mr. Su, don't worry. I will try my best to convince those who oppose us," Great Emperor Mingxin said. He was very determined. He understood that forming an alliance with Nanming City was a dead end. In the end, it would be swallowed up by Baiming City and Shiming City. But he also understood that forming an alliance with Shiming City would only lead to a faster destruction. "Let me convince them. That will save us more time," Su Yu calmly said. Great Emperor Mingxin was stunned. The group of people who followed him could not wait to cut off all ties with Nanming City. When they saw Su Yu, they would not show any kind expressions, let alone be convinced. Chapter 2645. Since it was a discussion of cooperation, Su Yu would have to meet his many followers sooner or later. So he might as well meet them at the banquet tonight. The banquet was quickly set up. In a certain side hall, 3 elderly Tao masters stood ramrod straight in front of the mindful emperor. They were not ordinary tunnel masters who had been recruited with money. Instead, they were people who had made great contributions to Dongming City over the years. For example, the one with the rosacea nose, who carried a wine gourd on his back, was responsible for recruiting strong tunnel masters. Nearly 1/3 of the tunnel masters in Dongming City were recruited by the rosacea nose old man, who had used all sorts of methods to recruit them. Another example was the burly merman with the trident, who was responsible for collecting all kinds of martial path resources. Over the past 10,000 years, more than half of the martial path resources had been transported over from the distant sea by this person. All of them were great contributors, and they were existences that the mindful emperor had to rely on. Thus, as the mindful emperor, he could not make a decisive decision on the matter of an alliance. Because these people were all people who had made great contributions to the emperor. Without their support, the mindful heart emperor's forces would instantly crumble and fall apart. Thus, the mindful emperor had no choice but to respect their opinions. "Everyone, the envoy from Nanming City has arrived. Tonight we will host a banquet for him," the mindful emperor said solemnly. Emperor Mindful said solemnly, I hope that you can listen to my opinion and work together to facilitate the negotiation. Do you understand? The three tunnel masters nodded indifferently, but did not give a clear answer. The mindful emperor sighed. From their expressions, the mindful emperor had already guessed what they were thinking. After saying this, he turned and left, feeling worried. I hope this group of old fellows will not go too far. After he left, the rosacea-nosed old man took down the wine gourd and drank a mouthful. He wiped his mouth and snorted. The great emperor is determined to walk towards destruction. There was deep dissatisfaction in his expression. The merman with the trident said coldly, "What is wrong with the great emperor? Why do you insist on forming an alliance with Nanming City? Is it because that little girl in Nanming City is so beautiful that he is obsessed with her?" Everyone knew about Empress Star Rain's beautiful eyebrows. Moreover, her appearance was forever fixed as a young girl, which made her even more attractive. He had countless admirers. Don't spout nonsense. No matter what, Empress Star Rain is Emperor Mindheart's sister. Emperor Mindheart wouldn't do such a thing that disrupts family ties, the old lady said with a frown. Then tell me, what do you think the great emperor is thinking? The man with the trident berated. The old woman was silent and sighed softly. Who knows? Putting aside the West Bright City, they chose the most useless South Bright City. She really wanted to know what the mindful emperor was thinking. There's no need to argue. No matter what, we will never agree to form an alliance with Southern Ming City. The man with the trident snorted. Eastern Brightness City isn't just Emperor Mindful's Eastern Brightness City. It's also our blood and sweat. Why should we let the mindful heart emperor walk this path to the end and bury all of our countless years of hard work? The old lady did not object to this. How heart-wrenching were those words. He seemed to have the intention of making himself one of the lords of Dongming City. Let's go. Let the envoy of Southern Clear City know our attitude. We must make him retreat. The old man with the rosacea said. Also, we need to secretly contact the envoy of West Bright City. The man with the trident nodded. That's right. The fate of Dongming City cannot be decided by the mindful heart emperor alone. The banquet began with intense preparations. The mindful heart emperor and Su Yu arrived first. As the great emperor, he should be the last to arrive. In the end, not only did the accompanying advisors not arrive early, they were even the last to arrive. Su Yu secretly observed all of this. He could vaguely understand the situation in Dongming City. The master was weak and the ministers were strong. The mindful heart emperor relied too much on his advisors, causing them to be unclear of their own positions. Of course, the situation in Southern Ming City was the same. If Su Yu were to raise his arm in Southern Ming City, most of the power would listen to him and not Empress Star Rain. However, Su Yu would not arbitrarily take over the power. The mindful heart emperor was a little embarrassed. He said, "I've made a fool of myself." "It doesn't matter. Just wait patiently." After waiting for an hour, just as the mindful heart emperor was about to explode in anger, the three people with the rosacea finally arrived. Apologies. The three of us had urgent matters to attend to, so we came late. Please forgive us, great emperor. The mindful heart emperor said with a cold expression. It's all right. Please take a seat. The three people with the rosacea sat down, their faces full of smiles. It was impossible to tell that they were targeting Su Yu. Let me introduce you. This is the envoy from Southern Ming City, Mr. Su, the mindful heart emperor said. Mr. Su, these three are my pillars of support. Su Yu nodded casually, smiling. Greetings, elders. The three of them returned his smile. When he noticed that there was another person standing behind Su Yu, the man with the trident asked meaningfully, "This is?" "A guard." The man with the trident took the initiative to greet him. "You are very strong." Fei Yunshin crossed his arms in front of his chest and said calmly, "Not bad. Your Excellency is too humble." The three-pronged fishman glanced at his palm from the corner of his eye. His palm was charred and severely burned. The mindful heart emperor was slightly surprised. What had happened? Why did it sound like the sky barracuda was very afraid of Su Yu's guard? Come, let me congratulate the success of our cooperation. The mindful heart emperor raised his wine cup. Su Yu smiled and raised his cup. The three people with the rosacea raised their wine cups one after another. The mindful heart emperor and Su Yu drank their wine in one gulp. The man with the trident and the old lady took a sip. Only the old man with the rosacea only took a sniff before putting down his wine cup. He said to himself, I will drink my own wine. Drinking with these people will affect my mood. The trident fishman and the old woman were expressionless and did not make a sound. The mindful heart emperor's eyes turned cold. He said meaningfully, warm the wine, don't talk nonsense. Our honored guest is here, don't be rude. He had already reminded the three of them not to target Su Yu. Now, they were making things difficult for Su Yu right from the start. They really didn't respect him, the great emperor. Haha, sorry, I said something wrong after drinking. Warm the wine laughed. Come, my lord from Nanming City, let me give you a toast personally. He naturally didn't have good intentions when he offered a toast. He took out the wine gourd on his back. It was filled with lava-like red wine. The wine continued to evaporate as if it was boiling lava. This is the divine wine I brewed myself. Only those who I admire can drink it. Warm the wine smiled. My lord, please don't decline. Chapter 26:46. Su Yu glanced at the wine. It was a wine brewed from the blood of various beasts. It contained the essence of the blood of various beasts, overbearing and strong. To one Jiao, it might be a rare treasure, but to others, it was poison. Because this wine required an extremely special bloodline to be able to digest it. If an ordinary person consumed it, their body would be destroyed by the overbearing and violent beast blood. If it was light, their body would be corroded, and their consciousness would be replaced by the violence of the beast blood. If it was heavy, they would die on the spot. This cup of wine of his was filled with malice. Not only did he not have good intentions, but it was also filled with malice. Emperor Mingxin frowned. Wen Jiao, don't mess around. He felt humiliated. He could not control his own subordinate. How would Su Yu see him now? He must be disappointed. Haha, great emperor, Nanming City is full of talents. This Mr. Su must be quite good to be able to become an emissary of Nanming City. How could he not even drink a cup of my wine? Wen Jiao chuckled. Emperor Mingxin put down the cup and grunted. I'll say this one last time. Enough is enough. He regretted arranging for the two sides to meet. These three did not intend to give him any face. They wanted to make things difficult for Su Yu and force him to retreat. It would be impolite to refuse. However, Su Yu agreed immediately and accepted the cup of wine. Emperor Mingxin secretly tried to stop him. He gave Su Yu a look and said, Mr. Su, don't drink it. This wine is not something you can drink. Even the other road masters would find it difficult to withstand the terrifying power of this wine. Su Yu said, if I don't drink it, won't they become even more lawless? Don't worry, a mere cup of wine is not a problem for me. Wen Jiao's eyes flickered. He gave this wine to force Su Yu to retreat. He did not intend for Su Yu to really drink it. Otherwise, Su Yu might really die. The trident fishman and the old woman were also surprised. Even they did not dare touch this wine. How could this little human dare to drink it? Could he not see the danger of this wine? As they pondered, Su Yu laughed. I'll drink first. As soon as he raised his head, Su Yu wiped everything clean. The strong wine immediately seeped into his body, emitting a boiling sensation. His stomach began to feel a burning pain. That was the effect of the alcohol starting to take effect, preparing to destroy his body. However, inside Su Yu's body, a space domain was attached to every corner of his body. All the beast blood that entered his body was cut into dust. It even separated the dust. The essence was left behind, while the tyrannical components that were harmful to the body were wrapped up and transferred away without anyone noticing. This was a new space domain god art that he had learned from Yen Rant's space domain. It was somewhat similar to the Milky Way star sand of the past, which could purify everything in the world. After drinking the cup, Su Yu was unaffected. Only his body was red, as if it was burning red iron. Wisps of white smoke rose from the surface of his body. Su Yu gently opened his mouth and exhaled a long, murky breath. Good wine. Just drinking a mouthful of it can help increase one's cultivation. Su Yu laughed heartily and cupped his fists in thanks. Wen Jiao was shocked and looked at Su Yu in disbelief. When he confirmed that Zhang Xian wasn't pretending to be calm and that he was really fine, he was astonished. The mermaid with the trident and the old lady were also in disbelief. Apart from Wen Jiao, there was a second person who could drink the beast blood wine? The mindful emperor was even more surprised. He thought to himself, Mr. Su is really extraordinary. Even this couldn't stop him. A smile appeared on his face again. Mr. Su's ability to drink is extraordinary. I admire you. Wen Jiao's face was slightly livid. He secretly winked at the mermaid with the trident and the old lady. The mermaid with the trident stared straight at Su Yu, and his voice was as loud and clear as a stone hammer. Mr. Su, as a human, I wonder what you are best at? This had nothing to do with the alliance that was to be discussed at the banquet tonight. Su Yu said lightly, I am good at many things. He was good at all of the 8 great domains of heaven and earth. Is that so? The mermaid with the trident did not think much of it. He thought to himself, this man is really arrogant. Does he think he can look down on us after drinking a cup of Wen Jiao's wine? However, Su Yu was even more arrogant. If you want to compete, show me what you are best at. The mermaid with the trident laughed angrily. What I am best at is strength. I'm afraid you can't compete with me. Strength was referring to his physical strength. The fact that he could throw the trident so far just now proved that his strength was unparalleled. Oh, what I am best at is also strength. Su Yu tapped the table with his finger, and many dents appeared. The mermaid with the trident sneered. Fine, let's compete? He stood up and looked at Su Yu coldly. The mindful emperor scolded, How dare you? This is a reception banquet, not a fight. What's more, this is my temporary imperial residence. Who would use force in the palace of the great emperor without permission? Would they still put him, a great emperor, in their eyes? Only then did the mermaid with the trident sit down and take out a special piece of metal. It was covered with veins. At first glance it looked like wood. This is the Golden Night Stone, one of the hardest stones in the Time Realm. The more severe the force, the more the wood veins on the Golden Night Stone will crack. Let's each pinch it and see who has more veins. Then we can compete. The mermaid with the trident stared at Su Yu. Su Yu nodded. Sure. I'll go first. The mermaid with the trident took the stone first. He suddenly exerted force in his palm and pinched it hard. All of a sudden, the 18 veins on the Golden Night Stone showed signs of cracking. 18 veins. The test was very fast. All it took was a firm grip. The mermaid with the trident threw the stone to Su Yu. It's your turn. Su Yu smiled and took it casually. His face was very calm, and there was no emotional fluctuation. Wen Jiao and the old lady secretly shook their heads. They had tried the Golden Night Stone, and it was really not something that ordinary people could shake. It was so hard that even a middle-stage Earth Master could not do anything to it. Only the mermaid with the trident was born with extraordinary strength could crush the veins. Su Yu was a human. He had neither innate talent nor extraordinary cultivation. Looking at his body, he did not look like he had received training in body refining technique. He probably could not even crush a single vein. The mindful emperor was slightly worried. In fact, whether Su Yu squeezed it or not, he would lose. If he did not squeeze it, he would be ridiculed by the mermaid with the trident, and he would have something to say about whatever Su Yu discussed about the alliance. If he squeezed it, Su Yu could not squeeze it, and he would be ridiculed by the mermaid with the trident. The three of them were determined to mess up the alliance's matter. Mr. Su, don't make things difficult for yourself, the mindful emperor sighed. Su Yu smiled faintly and grabbed the golden nightmare stone. Crack!